Okay, members, good evening. It's just on 7:15, so I think if everybody's sitting comfortably, we're ready to start. Welcome to this meeting of the Local Plan Subcommittee, 31st of July 2025. Welcome to members of the committee, those in the audience, and anybody watching via Braintree Council's YouTube channel. And welcome to officers as well. It's very nice to see you all. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Coleridge, who is being substituted by Councillor Schweer, Councillor Finken, who is substituted by Councillor Diamond, and Councillor Ritchie, substituted by Councillor Prime. Everybody else is here. Declarations of interest. Members, I'll start by saying I'm going to declare MPI on behalf of all of us for Councillor Thorogood, who is speaking, who is here in his capacity, I think, as County Councillor, but is also District Councillor and is known to all of us. And I also declare an interest for all of us for Michael Staines, known to us all as Councillor Staines, because one of the sites we'll be discussing tonight has been submitted by him. So I'll do a joint declaration on those. Could I have anybody else declaring an interest? Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, I was going to declare both of those, Madam Chairman, but in addition, I will leave for the Stock Street item because Councillor Staines is both a member of our councillor group and I've been to events at Stock Street, so I'll take no part and leave. Right,
thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you. I've got a few interests to declare. I've got a DPI direct pecuniary interest on Coggeshall site 2094. It's directly behind my house. Okay. And there are three other sites, 2088, 2093 and 2092, which are relatively close to my house. I've written this down, on Kelvedon Road and at the western end of Abbey Lane. So I will leave the chamber for those meetings. As mentioned, I know Michael Staines both personally and as a colleague, so I won't be in the room for that or for the DPI points.
Okay.
A couple of other things that are relevant. Coggeshall 2089, which is the land north of West Street. I gave evidence to the planning inquiry in support of BD's case to grant refusal when the appeal was dismissed, and I did briefly meet the applicant at that stage. I assume I can remain, but I won't speak or vote on that one.
Okay. Emma, do you want to?
Councillor Walsh, it's a matter for you to determine how far your mind is closed to that matter. It's a question of predetermination and bias. Obviously, acting at a public inquiry on behalf of the council does not create an interest, but obviously you have to be aware of the statements that you've made around that and the public perception of those statements. So if you feel that your mind is open, that you're able to consider the matter, then you may of course take part because you can come from a predisposition. But if you're determined the matter, then my advice is that you must remove yourself from the chamber.
I think I will remove myself because my position was quite clear, so I will remove myself for that one.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And finally, I just declare a more general interest. I'm a member of Coggeshall Parish Council. I didn't take any part in the Parish Council preparing their statement, and I wasn't at the Parish Council meeting, which was in August of last year when the original submission was formulated. Okay. So I will be remaining during that element.
Fine. Councillor Abbott.
A question flowing from all this, Madam Chairman. How do we deal with the public speaking section? Because obviously we want to be in the relevant bits,
yes,
but
yeah,
do we stay in for Stock Street?
Yeah, I'm coming on to that in just 1 minute. So any more declarations of interest from anybody? No? Okay. So item 3, minutes of previous meeting. We don't have any minutes available this evening. So question time. What I'm proposing to do is to hear the Stock Street site first. So anybody who needs to leave the room for that can go. And I will call forward the 3 speakers who've registered for that specific item to speak. We will then have a discussion on that, and I will take a vote on that separately. Then anybody who's left the room for that can come back in, and I will call forward the other 3 speakers who are just talking on general Coggeshall items, so they can speak on that. So Councillor Abbott, for example, if you're back in the room, then you will hear what they have to say on that, and we can move on to the agenda. So Councillor Walsh, let me see, you're leaving for quite a few, aren't you?
Recommendation 10, 11, 14, 15, 16 and 19.
Right, okay. So bear with me 1 minute. 10. What were the others? So
11.
10, 11.
14,
Yeah,
15,
right.
16
Mm,
and Stock Street 19.
okay, right. Well, we'll do Stock Street first, then I think, in that case, Emma, how should we work this? Thanks, Mem. Sorry, we're just trying to make sure this runs fairly smoothly. So we will do Stock Street first, as I've already described. Then we will do 1 to 9.
Yes.
Yeah. So that you can hear the general speakers on those, and then we will do the others, which Councillor Walsh is. That's not going to work because he's going to.
So if we
Would
do,
you bring if we did 1 to 9
Yes,
and then 12 and 13?
and then 12 and 13.
13,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, that's fine. That's what
yeah,
we'll
12,
do.
13,
And then the
17,
and 17 and 18
20.
and 20 and 21, and then Councillor Walsh can leave the room
Yes.
for that.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Okay, fine, good. Excellent. So we will make a start on item 5, which is Braintree District Local Plan Review, Regulation 18 Draft Allocations for Coggeshall. And we are going to make the first one. Lost it now. I've lost my stock. Oh, here we go. Which is 219 on your agenda, which is COG 2518 Stock Street Farm. So, Councillor Abbott, I think you're leaving the meeting, and Councillor Walsh. Okay, I'll just let you go. And then if I can have the first speaker, please, which is Lisa Calvert. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
very much. The local plan review boosts resident sense of place, promotes social cohesion and growing the local economy and amenity of Coggeshall, a key service village and tourism centre. Stock Street Leisure uses in the current local plan adopted from the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan in July 21, but Insert 15 does not currently show purple dots denoting leisure and entertainment. In April 24, Inspector stated optimal viable use for the Stock Streets listed barn was also leisure. The 7,000 vehicles annually attending a 200 capacity licence event at Stock Street is a tiny fraction of the 8.2 million vehicles estimated to use the A120 annually. National Highways owns the land bordering the A120 and can condition and provision any displays improvement required. Stock Street has proven irrevocable right over access of its neighbours' lands at all time for any reason, with multiple A120 access points enabling a one-way system to be conditioned. Stock Street is surrounded by established screening and leisure will utilise existing buildings only. Less than substantial heritage harm from guests seeking parking the listed setting is accepted in the ward. Grade 1 listed Grange Barn, Grade 2 listed Marks Hall Coach House and Grade 2 listed Hoochins, along with Hatfield Place, Prested Hall, Fens and Essex Barns. Technical visual heritage harm is outweighed by optimal viable use of listed buildings which allow their use and upkeep to provide public amenity for future generations. The A120 is a sustainable travel corridor with public buses running hourly 24 hours a day. The 600 metres of footpath from Stock Street to West Street along the A120, tricky for the inspector, is now consistent at 50 miles per hour with over 2 kilometres of footpath alongside the A120 from Hollies Road, Bradwell to Marks Farm, Braintree over 3 kilometres between Lees Farm, Coggeshall and Marks Tay, and just 100 metres of the route is unpaved but is a well-used 6-metre track illuminated by 10 street lights. Crossing the 50 mile per hour A120 at Stock Street is now consistent and no more difficult than Ambridge Road, Tay Road, Essex Way, Mars Lane, Bradwell, Kings Lane, Bradwell or Old Road, Surrix. Until the 30th of June 2024, Stock Street was a thriving small business without complaint with high client rating. Its viability is assured through strong enduring inquiries for leisure hire and use, consistent with its optimal viable use. Stock Street's location and annually reviewed premise licence with 0 complaints since 2016 governs disturbance risks to residences while enabling music to cover traffic noise. Adding the Grade 2 listed farmhouse to the venture will, with minimal intensification, help address the lack of visitor accommodation noted in the Council's 2018 tourism report. It will also diversify the venture to improve maintenance and preservation of the entire setting under the owner in common enterprise with benefits anticipated by those achieved at privately owned Hoochins. In conclusion, the following road speed reduction and inspectors stated optimal viable leisure use, Stock Street looks forward to a new chapter of cooperation within this council.
Thank you very much, Ms Calvert. Thank you. Next speaker I have is Adam Walsh, a member of the public from Coggeshall. Good evening, Mr. Walsh.
Good evening.
You also have 3 minutes.
Super. I'm Adam Walsh. I operate a local catering company based in Coggeshall. And I offer services to a number of leisure venues in the Braintree district and beyond. Marks Hall Coach House, Houchins, the Compasses at Patterswick, Old Essex Barn, Grange Barn, Coggeshall, Prested Hall, Tuffin Hall, Batterswick Farm Barn, the Braintree Institute, and of course Stock Street. I've been in business since 2010 and seen how leisure use can rescue and preserve listed buildings and bring positive economic and social activity to the countryside and communities around them. I've followed Stock Street closely, including the inspector's decision in April 2024, as its closure had a negative impact on my business, others locally and the surrounding area. The loss of local venue capacity and reduction in client choice has resulted in leisure business going outside of Coggeshall and the Braintree district. The concerns of the inspector about Stock Street's position on the A120 are now addressed by the maximum 50 mile/h speed limit enforced with average speed cameras 24/7 along the whole 15-kilometre stretch of the road from Marks Farm to Marks Tay. From personal experience, Stock Street is one of the safest venues to pull out of on the A120, and it's operated without incident since its start. Access to Stock Street by foot, bicycle from Coggeshall and crossings on the A120 is now the same as over 5 kilometres of the A120 between Marks Farm and Marks Tay, where pavement runs next to the road. I was surprised this important change was missed from officers' comments and did not lead to a positive recommendation for Stock Street's leisure use, which is greatly missed. I hope this committee votes to allocate leisure use for Stock Street, giving residents and visitors another great reason to enjoy and visit Coggeshall more. Let's have some common sense and grant Stock Street leisure use. The community wants Stock Street and the community needs Stock Street.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr Walsh. Thank you. Next speaker I have is Peter Cowling, member of the public and from Coggeshall. Good evening, Mr Cowling.
Good evening. My name is Pete Cowling. I've been a resident of Coggeshall Town since 2016. I've used Stock Street to host family events showing off the lovely Coggeshall to friends and family and for traditional archery during winter months. I'm keen to highlight the committee that the goals of the local plan review process go beyond houses to create a successful economy, to promote a local economy which supports growth of existing businesses and encourages new entrepreneurial enterprises and employers to locate in the district by providing high quality land and buildings in sustainable locations. Stock Street is a small capacity leisure venue seeking to use its redundant, pretty Grade 2 listed barn without change and for its listed farmhouse to offer some much needed extra accommodation to Coggeshall's visitors. Stock Street features in the Coggeshall neighbourhood plan adding social cohesion and economic benefits, but lost an appeal for change of use in 2024 and had to close. A lot has changed in that time. The A120 is now a max 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, average speed cameras, and is referred to as a sustainable transit corridor, while Coggeshall's housing and population grows, but without any new leisure facilities alongside. Other facilities that are lacking as well. Stock Street is not remote. It is in the middle of the ward between Bradwell, Stystead and Coggeshall and is sustainably and safely accessible on foot from Coggeshall by existing pavement and bridleway. Its small scale means it attracts a tiny fraction of the A120's annual traffic volume and that is outside the peak flow times. I ask the local plan review subcommittee to allocate leisure use to Stock Street tonight, which residents actually want, to complement any more housing approved in this small site session and from the area's larger housing sites review, which will take place later in the autumn. Just a couple more things if there's time. In your agenda and other supporting documentation, you call Coggeshall a village. It's been a town since 1256, granted by Henry III in a charter as a market. Yours was granted by the Bishop of London in 1190, and Housestead had one, royal one, shortly before Coggeshall got it. So if you refer to Coggeshall, can you please refer to it as Coggeshall or Coggeshall Town, not Coggeshall Village. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr Cowling. Right, members, we will now go to the presentation for that item, which is on page 28 of your agenda, Coggeshall 2518. And Gary is going to give a presentation on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gary.
First of all, I'll do an introduction for Coggeshall and then I'll move on to the site. Coggeshall is designated a key service village in the local plan. Outlying settlements, Coggeshall Hamlet and Surrix are also included in the report. Coggeshall offers a range of key services such as primary and secondary education, doctors, dentists, a post office, village hall, recreational spaces, allotments, pubs, restaurants and a variety of retail. Coggeshall Hamlet can also access these services using sustainable movement. However, Surrix is isolated and lacks facilities. Secondary education is also sustained by a wider hinterland, while heritage tourism attracts visitors, which helps sustain the restaurants and other services. The nearest rail station is Kelvedon. It's 3.5 kilometres away, but sustainable connections are limited. Coggeshall is on the A120 corridor, which is a route for the X20 Express bus, which offers an hourly service 24 hours a day. Although Braintree Town is the nearest town, many residents travel to Colchester for higher education, employment, retail, acute and tertiary healthcare. A proposed new settlement is at Marks Tay, 6 kilometres away in the Colchester draft local plan. However, this has not been approved by Colchester Council yet. Overall, Coggeshall is a relatively sustainable location for development within the district. Moving on to COG 2518 on the screen, Stock Street Farm. This is 0.5 hectares. The proposal is for 230 metres of leisure space located on the A120 between Coggeshall and Bradwell. Site was previously used for weddings and small exhibitions. In the report, I say it's currently unclear if this is a change of use or expansion. I believe it's to retain its existing use, which may have lapsed, or it's a change of use from a barn into SG. Submission refers to mixed-use community facilities and visitor accommodation, and I think there's a lack of clarity on the specific use class at this stage. The wedding venues are SG typically, visitor accommodation is typically Class C1, and a privatised leisure space doesn't qualify as Class D2. Direct access would be from a busy stretch of the A120. It does possess safety concerns for vehicles and pedestrians crossing the road. Site is relatively exposed with limited landscape screening, a barn for agricultural storage lies to the north. There's limited parking, although I think there may be parking outside of the red line boundary. That bit is unclear as well. Development must consider the setting of Stock Street Farmhouse, the barn, which are both Grade 2 listed buildings, and users of the site would experience noise from passing traffic, including heavy vehicles, which is a significant issue for future use and design. And then, in conclusion, further detail is needed to assess the planning implications and suitability of the proposed use. And using the information we have, due to the access issues and the site's isolation in the countryside, the site is not recommended for allocation to members.
Thank you very much, Gary. Right, members. Anybody? Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before we discuss this site and the rest of Coggeshall, can we just determine the fact that Coggeshall is a town and not a village?
Yes, can I have a comment from officers, please?
So when we're talking about that, we're talking about the designation in the local plan, which is a hierarchy of towns, key service villages. So we refer to it as a key service village in planning terms, whereas something may be a town via a charter, but it is about the hierarchy in the local plan and the spatial strategy.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Members, any comments at all? If not, then if nobody has any particular comments, then I will ask for... Oh, sorry, Councillor Butland.
In the absence of any contrary comments, can I move officers' recommendation, Chairman?
Thank you. I was just going to ask if somebody would move recommendation, which is that the site is not allocated. Thank you, Councillor Butland. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Martin, thank you. Could I have a show of hands? That's been moved and seconded that is not allocated. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Right. Okay. We need to get Councillors Walsh and Abbott back in. Right, thank you, members. So we will now go back to the top of the agenda for the Coggeshall items. I have three speakers. The first is Chris Bevan, who is an applicant who wants to speak on, I think particularly on site 2085 and Coggeshall generally. If you'd like to come forward, Mr. Bevan, thank you very much. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Chris Bevan, and I've supported Coggeshall Town Football Club and its chairman Graham Smith for over 10 years. Our shared goal is to build a fully funded, sustainable and inclusive community football club that benefits local people long into the future. Since Graham took over the club in 2013, we've grown dramatically. Today we have more than 500 playing members, ranging in age from 4-year-olds to adults. but this growth has far outpaced our existing facilities, which comprise 2 heavily used grass pitches, 1 outdated changing block. We also have one outdated changing block. We also have a separate modest clubhouse, which has a small bar and social space. The club is now at absolute capacity, and we've had to turn away over 20 teams simply because we do not have the facilities to enable them to play or train. We've had to rent additional space in Markstay, Kelvedon, Fearing and Earlscourne, which puts pressure on those local clubs and limits their own development. The draft allocation before you presents a rare opportunity. It pairs much needed housing with state-of-the-art community sports hub, a complete double win. The new facilities currently proposed would include an FA-compliant stadium pitch, a full-size 3G artificial surface, new grass pitches, a modern clubhouse with proper changing rooms, and a multi-use community and leisure space. We will be able to provide facilities and programmes to benefit local health, inclusion and recreation, as well as increased participation, and offer dedicated space for women and girls, veterans and disabled teams to play and train. We are fully invested in ensuring the wider activities on the site are driven from the bottom up, and we are seeking to begin informal engagement with the Parish Council to identify other local sports teams and groups that need a home to help shape the wider site as a shared community asset, not just for the football club. If allocated, we will be engaging with the wider community to identify their needs and make the new facility truly community-led. I would like to flag that the current site boundary shown on the draft plan includes land that's not available to the club. I would kindly ask members to seek clarification from officers so that this could be corrected. There is no other proposal before you that delivers this level of community benefit, sport, health and housing in a single sustainable package. This is a once in a generation chance to secure long-term facilities for the people of Coggeshall and the wider Braintree area. I respectfully urge members to support the officer's recommendation and retain this allocation in the draft local plan.
Thank you very much, Mr Bevan. We'll discuss that site shortly when we get a little bit further down the agenda. Yes, Councillor Butland.
I wonder whether it would be appropriate to discuss that one whilst those comments are clear in our mind. They relate only to one specific application, as I understand it, which is 2085.
We can do, although the next 2 speakers also want to talk about that site as well.
I beg your pardon.
So that's all right. That's fine. It's a fair point. But I think if I call the next 2 forward, and then we can take that one first, if members would like to do it that way. All right. So could I have Councillor Jeff Heaton, please, who is a member of Coggeshall Parish Council, who wants to talk on that same site, 2085 and also 2084.
Good evening. I'm only going to talk about the 2 recommended sites. We strongly urge you to reject both sites. 2084. In 2018, Bovis got permission to build 300 houses in a field on the outskirts of our village and outside the development boundary. The council had to accept this proposal as Braintree didn't have a 5-year land supply. Now Bovis are back and they want to put another 300 houses in another field outside the development boundary. As a land supply issue doesn't arise this time, you don't have to accept this. You have to decide whether this field is suitable for 300 more houses. Let's consider the impact of the houses across the road. Coggeshall Mill Estate came with no additional infrastructure, no services. Coggeshall as a key service village was expected to provide everything. So how's that going? Sales at the estate have been slow. This is actually a mercy because right now we don't have enough places in local schools or space for doctors at the surgery. Extra classes are being provided by sacrificing playing fields and playground space, and the doctor's surgery will be extended if an acceptable design can be found. But should we be losing playground space and playing fields? Is this sustainable development? We don't think so. Then there's the traffic. The estate has brought a significant increase in traffic through the village and onto the A120. The strategic growth corridor often becomes a strategic parking corridor. Roads through the village are narrow. Stretches of East Street, a main thoroughfare, have no pavements and vehicles pass within inches of timber-framed buildings dating back to the 13th century. Incidents involving serious damage to property have increased significantly, threatening the many historic and listed buildings on East Street, West Street, Church Street and Stoneham Street. Coggeshall may be a key service village known for its sense of community, but a 16-seat minibus and a smallish co-op won't serve the needs of an additional 600 households. We're struggling with one 300-house development. We simply can't take more. 2085. This is on West Street as you approach Coggeshall from the A120. It would be an incongruous large development outside the development boundary and divorced from the main settlement, made even bigger and more incongruous by the addition of Griggs Farm to the call for sites proposal. You're being asked to reject the site across the road. Surely what's applicable to that site is applicable here, so this site should also be rejected. Finally, this is a pig in a poke. There are no details of the proposed new stadium. We're only told it will have unique benefits for the local community and a historic football club. And nothing that Mr Bevan has said changes my view of that. Will it? This is an assertion made by a developer. It should not be a basis for your decision. Coggeshall is a unique medieval village that deserves protection. We urge you to reject both sides.
Thank you very much. Spot on. Thank you very much, Councillor Heaton. And the final speaker this evening is Councillor Paul Thorogood, speaking, I think, in his capacity as a county councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Agenda item 5, in 3.4, it says the A120 is described as a sustainable travel corridor. It is not sustainable. In 2020, Essex Highways described the A120 as not fit for purpose and long overdue for an upgrade. 4 out of 5 people who responded to Essex Highways consultation in 2017 agreed. That was 8 years ago and traffic is now far worse. Queues form westbound from 7 AM and eastbound in the evening rush hour. It is a miserable road and more development along the A120 will heap more congestion and more misery on its users. I understand that the stretch of the A120 was designed for a maximum of 18,000 vehicles per day, but 26,000 are currently using it. The A120 from Braintree to Markstay cannot be considered as a sustainable growth area. I won't go into the next part because it mentions a lot of stuff which Councillor Heating has just mentioned. I'll go on to COG 2084, land south of Colchester Road, 319 homes. This development would just be bolted onto the edge of Coggeshall, and would bring no new infrastructure with it. In fact, it would just suck the marrow out of the already under pressure road network, schools and health centre. It would be a liability and not an asset, and I ask the committee not to allocate it to the draft plan. If you are minded to include it, speed limits must be reduced, so traffic calming measures must be introduced in Colchester Road, currently 40 miles an hour, East Street, West Street and St Peter's Road, currently 30 miles an hour, and a pedestrian crossing is needed outside the co-op in East Street because of the extra traffic we're getting. Onto COG 2085, land south of West Street, 54 homes. In 3.76, I'm very concerned that the football club car park is left out of this scheme, as it is indicated that it is proposed to be part of an Environment Agency scheme. For several years, the EA has been promising to submit plans for a flood alleviation scheme which includes a 300-metre dam across the Blackwater at the bottom of the football club land. It is not acceptable that the existing car park could form an access point to the dam, which could in theory carry a road across it to what would be Essex's largest quarry on the other side of the river, which is required for the flood scheme should it ever go ahead. In 3.78, the housing scheme is described as enabling to allow Coggeshall Town Football Club to move from its existing site to behind Greggs. I do have concerns that the area south of the existing football pitch is a floodplain and is a nature zone dense with vegetation, and is a home to a lot of wildlife, including the protected water vole. Likewise, the area of the Blackwater south of Greggs is home to otters, and I would be concerned about the development stretching down to the river and the impact of floodlighting on local wildlife. Both COG 2084 and 2085 are not in the Coggeshall neighbourhood plan and would stretch the town boundary into the countryside. Without a new A120 dual carriageway from Braintree to the A12, the current A120 is not fit for purpose to provide for large numbers of new homes, and Coggeshall's internal narrow streets are not fit for more traffic generated from bolted-on development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Thank you very much. Right, members, as the last 3 speakers have all referenced the same sites, I think what we will do is to take recommendation 5 first. That's 2084, which is on page 14 of your agenda, and then we'll follow that with 2085. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. COG 2084 is land south of Colchester Road. It's 12.75 hectares and can accommodate around 319 dwellings. It's south of Colchester Road, just east of Coggeshall Road. It's a residential proposal with a potential to deliver up to 50 dwellings per annum, so it's a 5 to 10 year project. The development is expected to begin within the first 5 years. The land is currently in agricultural use, comprises a mix of arable fields and scrubland. It's relatively flat and well contained by mature trees and dense hedgerows along its eastern, southern and western boundaries. These natural features provide a degree of visual screening from the surrounding landscape. There are no known ecological flooding or contamination constraints affecting the site. In terms of landscape sensitivity, it's assessed as having medium to low capacity for change. While the site is visually enclosed, it occupies slightly elevated farmland that is visible from the approach to Coggeshall, particularly from the west side of the River Blackwater Valley. Surrounding land uses are also agriculture, residential properties, and a large auto repair business sits in the middle, and that's characterised by industrial sheds and open storage. Access is proposed directly from Colchester Road with 2 potential access points. The location benefits from close proximity to bus stops where the X20 provides an hourly service between Stansted and Colchester. Most of the site lies within 1 kilometre of services and facilities in Coggeshall, making it a relatively sustainable location. Although there are no heritage assets on the site itself, there are nearby designated assets, including the Coggeshall Conservation Area, 2 Grade 2 listed buildings, Lees Farmhouse to the east and Braes Cottage to the north. However, the impact on these assets is considered limited at this stage, particularly due to the screening provided by the existing hedgerow and the potential to set development back from the road. The site is located within Green Buffer 3 and Protected View 1 in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan. These policies aim to preserve the setting of the village and protect valued long views, particularly from Colchester Road. Development here would need to be supported by a visual impact assessment and would likely reduce the landscape's capacity to accommodate change. A deep landscape verge is proposed by officers to reinforce the boundaries to the south and east and mitigate impact on the wider landscape. In summary, this site is a sustainable location with good access to services and facilities. There are limited historic constraints identified at the moment, so the key concerns relate to the impact on landscape character and the rural setting of the town. Impact on protected views and green buffer areas were also identified. However, the strategic policies of the local plan are able to override the neighbourhood plan. As such, COG 2084 is recommended to members for allocation.
Thank you, Gary. Right. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coggeshall is one of the most unique and most unique and historic villages in our district, with over 100 listed properties and 2 National Trust properties. As we have heard, over 370 new dwellings have already been built in recent years, including on the Bovis site, which was not originally allocated in the previous local plan. In terms of sustainability, these are different points to those made by the parish council. Specifically, it said in the officer's report, the figure for the contribution to the surgery is in fact £153,000. I got that directly from the NHS estates manager, and in it was said this money should be provided before the first houses went up on Bovis. They haven't had a penny of it recently, and as members will know, there was a recent planning application to extend the surgery, and it was actually declined by our planning committee. The primary school too, as has been publicly announced, is already at full capacity, and indeed I believe the Essex County Council are looking at extending it. That's based on existing and pipeline developments. I think the site would significantly, if not substantially, extend the village onto primary agricultural land, further affecting the defined area of the settlement. I agree with the officer's comment, Ray, the Labour neighbourhood plan, that it won't directly coalesce into another settlement, but it will extend the compact form of the village out into open countryside, and it will be suburbanising what is open green field, and as we note, it's slightly elevated, so there are quite attractive views south over the Blackwater Valley and across the plain towards the Tiptree direction. So the point about hedges, I think, while I'm not saying it's incorrect, but a hedge is very small scale and detailed item. I don't think it adequately mitigates the strategic landscape context. And I'm particularly concerned that in the report there's reference to access onto the Colchester Road, but there is no comment at all or assessment of the implications of the junction onto the A20, and the eastern edge of this site basically goes up to the most easterly junction with the A120, and as we know, and I won't repeat what's been said, but as we know, my understanding is that there's no committed funding in any programme to extend the A120. So we're going to be adding to that, and something like 319 houses, if allocated and subsequently confirmed. I mean, would that not be at least 600 extra cars plus visitors? So I have serious reservations, and I would not be in favour of allocating 2084.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Just to clarify one point, the application to expand the surgery didn't come to planning committee. It was actually an officer decision, and it was refused on solid planning grounds, but they are of course welcome to come forward with another plan if they so wish, to try and overcome the objections that were raised. All right.
Thank you. It was declined, but not at committee.
Yes, but not by committee. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Right. Any? Sarah,
Chair,
yes.
would you mind also, if I clarify, the Section 106 money referred, the £154,000, that is held by the District Council, so it has been paid by the developer. It is ready for us to hand over once there is a planning permission in place for that GP surgery.
Okay, fine. Yep. Okay. Anybody? Sorry, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I wanted to pick up as well, as speakers have, on this comment at paragraph 3.4, which actually also appeared for the discussion on Rivenhall regarding the A12, and here it is in the context of the A120, which says it's a sustainable travel corridor. I really, with the best will in the world, don't know where that comes from. The A120 is not a sustainable travel corridor, but others have said the same. I went through the sites today very carefully, and I'm trying to be consistent. I've said all the way through that I think the villages should be contributing. The question is how and where. This is a very difficult one for Coggeshall because, as speakers have said, it's got one of the highest concentrations of listed buildings of any village in the district. It's got particular travel pinch points in the middle of the village where you've got medieval timber frame buildings extremely close to the road, and you don't have normal two-way working of traffic. So those are significant restrictions, and also, as Councillor Walsh said, for this site. So if you imagine traffic leaving this site, where's it going to go? To the left, it's going to go into the village and meet that pinch point immediately. They can go straight up to the A120 north. But a lot of the traffic, I would imagine, will try and get onto the A120 at the eastern end, where there is a crossover junction, which is notoriously dangerous. I mean, the crossover junctions in the Coggeshall area of the A120 have been the subject of many crashes. So I think for me, I can't support this. I might support something that's smaller than this, but I think on this scale, over 300 houses, in addition to the 300 on the other side of the road, it's just too big. And it's almost like, which of the sites have we got before us tonight actually would be acceptable for Coggeshall? And it's a really difficult choice. And the final thing I'd say on it is, at this scale, this site is probably not going to have any services on it. It's not going to have any of the things that we need to make Coggeshall more sustainable, like another primary school or a preschool or a shop or, you know, whatever. It's just going to be a housing estate unless officers are going to tell me different. And I think that's a significant issue, because then we're ending up with over 600 houses at the far eastern end of the village, which are just all the, you know, and they're very welcome, obviously, new residents, but they're all using services from an existing pot in the rest of the village, which are already overloaded. So I think it boils down to me for this site, there's perhaps something smaller, but I can't support it at this scale.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Yes, Sarah.
Apologies, Chair. Just in terms of clarifying with capacity, the 320 that's given in the report is an officer calculation, but actually the developer has put forward 200, so it may be slightly smaller than... It's possible that they've done more detailed work to sort of work out layouts.
Okay. Right, Councillor Parker.
Yes, I agree this is a difficult one for us as a committee, but we are here as a committee to try and allocate housing across the district, sadly, and we have no control of what that number is. We've been given a number and we have to try and find sites that are suitable for that, to provide that number. As much as Coggeshall is probably one of our, probably the prettiest town in the whole of the district, and it really is an absolute gem. It does have a lot of services, unlike even other key service villages. So well, actually, probably on a par with other key service villages, but it is, in terms of sustainability, one of the places in the district, apart from our three towns, obviously, which have taken an awful lot of housing already and probably find it difficult to find places to put additional housing for many, certainly for Braintree and Witham, as we've been through already. It is a place that is within the definition of sustainability, a sustainable location, as officers have outlined. In terms of, I am very concerned about the comments that have been made about the capacity of the school and the doctor's surgery. I would hope that that is possible. I mean, we have this all the time. The theory is that we can deal with this through collecting Section 106 and monies, and that facilities can be expanded to deal with those pressures. That is the whole point of Section 106 monies. Admittedly, these never seem to materialise in time, and there are these pinch points, pressure points that build up because the money hasn't come through, facilities haven't extended at the rate, at the speed that they should have done. But that is the system that we work with. Appreciate the concerns too about the traffic going through the town. The time scale here, we've been told, is 5 to 10 years. As probably that's going to be realistically optimistic. I would really hope that in 10 years' time, we might have the A120 dual carriageway. I mean, this is what we are aiming, all of us, to try to achieve, an extension to the A120 to relieve the traffic pressures that's building up everywhere in the district. So I would hope that by the time people living in houses, should this be allocated and should it get permission, then we might have some progress, some real progress on that road, and therefore the traffic problems that currently exist on this road, now absolutely acknowledge they're very real, and I absolutely acknowledge that crossing the road is extremely dangerous. In fact, something I wouldn't choose to do myself, actually. So I, reluctantly, given the fact that we do need to find somewhere to put these houses, I am going to support the officer's recommendation on this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Well, we can but hope with the A120 and the A12. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I appreciate a very difficult one, this one. Just a couple of points of clarification, if I may. Regarding the provision and the contribution towards health, now obviously that is a contribution for physical improvements or additionality in terms of the building of a health facility, isn't it? And I think it's very important to make the point here that as the planning authority setting a strategic local plan, or indeed the planning authority, or indeed any successor planning authority, adjudicating on outline and reserved matters planning applications, we have absolutely no scope in terms of levering in commissioned health services, do we? So I think that's important to consider, actually, that all the contributions for buildings, and we've, as a council, contributed to building, that doesn't necessarily mean you're able to lever in health practitioners to actually serve those facilities in the communities. The second point is, if the subcommittee was minded to recommend, as part of the Reg 18, that this was allocated, could it make a recommendation for a smaller number of houses allocated? Ms Aston referred to the fact that the developer has said something in the region of 200, I think. Could that actually be written into our recommendation? Because I appreciate that's not going to find great favour with the community of Coggeshall, but it may alleviate some short, medium-term concerns, if nothing else.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Yes, Sarah.
Yes, you could.
Right, okay, well that might help. Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Chairman. It's actually following on from that point. I didn't realise what Councillor Cunningham was going to ask, but it's more of a general point in regards to what Sarah said about the developer putting forward the 200 houses, and we've got before us the 319. Just for some clarification, what number are we taking when we're totting up all these numbers in regards to the numbers that we need at the end of this local plan process? Because if we've got potentially 200 here, then we're okay in it, but are we using the 319 number, knowing that the 319 number probably won't come to fruition? So at the end of this, are we going to have a false number that's never going to be able to, I'm just conscious, but then also conscious that when this is put in front of us, would it be more advisable to say about the 200 rather than 319? Because there might be people around this table that would be comfortable, maybe too strong a word, but acceptable of 200, like Councillor Cunningham has mentioned, but not of the 319. So just some clarification in regards what number is being used to go forward, because there might be lots of these that we've already had, maybe, I don't know, or going to have coming forward to us that literally are working on two different numbers, and I'm just conscious at the end of this process, what sort of number are we going to have?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah?
So just a reminder that the local plan process is iterative, so we're still going through lots of technical work that will inform the ultimate capacity. The local plan process itself, the examination, will test the capacity, and then ultimately a development management planning application will determine the final capacity. So it's a sort of ballpark figure in the local plan process, but it's got to be deliverable. So it isn't fixed absolutely at this point. We as officers would take a cautious approach to ensure that we can hit those numbers. So we don't want to put numbers in that are pie in the sky numbers that we really can't achieve. The way we do it is we basically take the site area and we times it by a density of generally 20 dwellings per hectare. So that's determined the number in the report, but the developer has gone for a more cautious approach, possibly because they're more aware of SUDS requirements that would take the capacity down, or landscaping requirements that will take the capacity down. But as the local plan process progresses, we'll be constantly sort of refining numbers to ensure that we meet that deliverability test when we get to examination.
Yeah, Councillor Bowers.
Thank you, Sarah. That's very helpful. I suppose just on that point then, is there, I'm presuming from what you're saying is, say we allocated this as a draft, all these are sort of draft allocations obviously, but by the time we get to the final local plan, using this one as an example, and obviously a decision hasn't been made yet, but if we say approve like the 319 tonight, when we get the final one to approve, it could be wouldn't be a number that's more, but could quite easily be a number that's less. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham.
And also, sorry, apologies, questions, follow questions, but I think it's important we explore all the options here. If we were minded that this work would be included in the emerging local plan refresh as an acceptable site, presumably through the development and control process, through outline and reserved matters, there may be the opportunity to lever in a slightly different housing supply than we may suggest. So basically not just a mirror maybe of the Bovis site across the road, because I'm particularly, if school dependency and school places is a pertinent concern there might be an opportunity to deliver in smaller houses, bungalows, perhaps maybe encouraging a slightly different demographic to move into Coggeshall, and they're helping with the sustainability of the local services, shops, restaurants. You know, there's been a passionate case made for the local economy. So there would be that degree of flexibility, perhaps, to deliver in a slightly different housing supply, more suitable to the needs.
Yes, that's correct. So
And indeed, the social infrastructure limitations as well, of course. Yeah.
So once we have a sort of preferred options in terms of the sites that are going to go forward, then ECC will comment on the education provisions. So if the schools were deemed to be unexpandable and at capacity, you might go for an over 55 provision type of housing. So you're right, all of that can be refined as the local plan process progresses.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a good point, Councillor Cunningham, because what we know, those of us who are involved in planning, but not everybody does, any site that is allocated in the local plan, and even when a local plan is adopted, still has to go through the planning process and is subject to great scrutiny in terms of layout, design, landscaping and numbers and so on. So there is still quite a lot of room for manoeuvre in terms of numbers and how it looks and so on. Right. Okay, any other comments? Councillor Walsh.
Just very briefly, I take the point about the A120, but my understanding is that it's not in any RIS investment profile and to 2030, and you know the recent decision on the A12 does not give me confidence. I also understand, because I got in touch with the NHS, that they were told that that it was expected that money would come to the surgery before the first of the Bovis houses were completed. I did speak to the senior clinician there, and she said none of the money's coming through. So we're getting the houses without any confirmation as to when the additional contribution will come through. And given the pressures already within the village and in terms of highway access, and there are 3 dangerous junctions, I remain concerned that a proposal of 200 to 319 is disproportionate.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Sarah?
I won't comment on the RIS. You're correct regarding the A120. In terms of the NHS, so the normal trigger in a Section 106 agreement is that on commencement of development, you would pay the money to the district council. That does not mean you pay the money to the NHS. In order for us as the local planning authority to be satisfied that the NHS are going to spend it on its designated purpose of expanding that surgery, we have to have a scheme in place for them to build out before we can give the money. So once they get the planning permission, we're happy to have discussions with them on addressing the reasons for refusal. Once they get the planning permission, we will hand the money over for them to build it. But we have to be sure as a local planning authority that it's used for the purpose that the agreement says. That's why we haven't handed the money over yet.
Okay. Right, Councillor Parker.
Just picking up on points made earlier. Just to clarify, if we were to allocate this site now, are we allocating it for a specific number, or are we just allocating effective piece of land?
We can allocate, I think, for 200, if that's what members... Yeah, Councillor Bowes-Flint, do you want to come in there?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Given the advice that we've had from Sarah Ashton and the fact that you stated that the doctor's surgery was refused under officer's delegation, it didn't come to committee, can I ask if the doctor's surgery have had a pre-app?
They hadn't prior to making the application. We are encouraging that now.
So I would suggest then that Councillor Walsh goes back to the doctor's surgery, and perhaps he can advise them of the same, and that would then encourage them perhaps to get something that will work so that they do get that money that we hold for that building.
I completely agree, and if I could just say through the chair, I have actually already done that. I think there may have been one objection, and I take your point, Sarah. Factually, that's correct. But what the consequence, I think, is the same. We're getting the development, the houses, well in advance of the extra infrastructure.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Councillor Walsh. Yeah, just a final comment on surgery. My understanding was that they did not go for pre-app advice before putting that application in, but I understand conversations are ongoing now about them getting some advice, submitting a fresh application, which hopefully will overcome officers' objections. So, yeah. Right, I think we've given this a very good airing, so I would need somebody to move something. At the moment, this site is allocated for housing, but we can put a comment in that it could be for 200 rather than the 319. Would somebody like to move something? Councillor Parker, I think you've just got your hand up first.
Yes, happy, willing to move that for 200.
Right,
please.
Okay,
Thank
does
you.
that find a seconder? Councillor Martin. Right, could I have a show of hands? This is for the site to be allocated, but with 200 homes. Those in favour? Right, thank you. Those against? Right, thank you, members. So that has been approved, so that site is allocated. Thank you. So now we move on to COG 2085, which is on pages 16 and 17 of your agenda. Gary.
Thank you, Chair. So 2085, it's land south of West Street for it's 3.28 hectares, and the officer calculation is 54 dwellings. The site represents a larger variation of development on the football ground. It proposes land both north and south, as well as the stadium itself. The car park is excluded from the red line boundary that we received. This area is considered for a Environment Agency scheme, as previously described, but it's currently not considered an impediment to development, and it's believed that this is a temporary use and could be included in a future proposal. We will take an iterative approach to the red line boundary and the allocation in this regard. The site lies to the west of Coggeshall Village and the Dutch Nurseries development, forming a satellite cluster of built-up areas around the historic Isinglass factory buildings. These are now flats. There are informal footpath links to Dutch Nurseries, suggesting potential functional integration. The proposal being promoted is an enabling development for the football club, with plans to relocate the training pitches, stadium, access and parking to land south of Griggs Farm, which is currently a rural employment site, but not designated. However, the proposal is in early stages, and the full extent of land to be developed is not yet confirmed. What is clear is that development will result in the loss of arable land and extend built form into the open countryside, so that must be considered. The residential site itself slopes gently down to the River Blackwater with flat areas for pitches. The area has medium capacity for change. Existing boundary landscaping provides a good degree of visual containment for the residential site, but development of new facilities for the new football stadium would result in a moderate loss of openness and rural character where that sits. The site is designated a green amenity area in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan, which requires development to respond positively to landscape ecology, heritage and recreational value. Additionally, part of the site falls within the designated dark skies area, and the floodlit sports pitches being built as the part of the stadium would be a concern in regards to this policy. And it is believed that this could be managed by condition. Access is currently via the football club's existing entrance, which is considered suitable for adaptation for residential development. Public transport is available on West Street, and public access to village services, pedestrian access to village services is supported by footpaths and street lighting. There are no heritage or archaeological constraints on site, though nearby Grade 2 listed buildings include Isengard Factory and a milepost. These assets will need a heritage impact assessment to understand its effects. Although they are already within a built-up context, which may reduce sensitivity. This is a unique opportunity for enabling development to support the football club. There are community benefits for users of the football club and for the community as a whole. The site is in a relatively sustainable location, and existing landscaping could help reduce the impact of the new facilities. These benefits must be weighed against the loss of open countryside and other impacts related to relocating the stadium. Officers recommend a draft allocation subject to further assessment of the replacement stadium's impacts. A supporting policy will be required to guide development and ensure community benefits are secured. And recommendation 6 is to allocate the land south of West Street for housing and land at Griggs Farm for formal and informal recreation.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor Abbott.
I'll let Councillor Walsh go first as full member, but before that, I can't read that. Can the officer say what all that legend on that map says?
Yes, I just, if I may, I just picked up on that myself. Thank you. Obviously, I can't read it because I've got my wrong glasses on, so there we go. All right, so the green area is residential development area A, which is approximately 1 hectare. I think that's on the existing training pitch. The red area below that is residential area B, which is about 1.5 hectares, and that's the existing field, football ground, sorry. The purple area below residential development area C, 1.6 hectares. Now, I believe it was this area that was referred to as potentially being removed or having the conflict with the Angler Water area. Now, the area in yellow is shown as Christopher Hill ownership, which is about 6.9 hectares. The black arrow leading into the area is just the proposed football club access, which I believe is coming off an existing access to that field. Now, the green striped area is some landscaping proposals. There is a proposed pedestrian cycle access towards the bottom, which is the dashed line at the bottom. And the proposed football club area site is about 6.8 hectares with a car parking area, which is the hatched area at the top. It's showing a football ground, some training pitches, a outdoor gym, and some smaller areas for an AstroTurf pitch and some five-a-side, seven-a-side, five-a-side and seven-a-side type pitches. So there's quite a few smaller scale stuff at the bottom there.
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On this proposal, I do recognise that there is a contribution to new housing and that there would be community benefits from the indicative stadium. However, I do feel that the proposal as it stands overall is too general and unspecified. It's a very large site that extends, as we can see, along the south side of West Street, basically from the Dutch Nursery right up to the A120. Some 2/3 of it is proposed for informal and formal recreation, and what has just been said is helpful, but we don't have any indication that I saw in the report whatsoever as to the size or capacity of the stadium, and surely we need that to be able to indicate, for example, the impacts that it will have on the community and other parts of the district. You know, how much extra traffic will be generated. The new housing will lead to a loss of essentially green open space. The current football ground is modest and it's low rise, and you can see over it to the Blackwater Valley, and we've taken this before recommendation 2 on 2081, but that proposes 25 to 50 houses. So this is up to double the amount of housing in the separate option, and the smaller housing option in recommendation 2, 2081, is recommended for decline. So this is up to twice the size of that in terms of housing. Again, there's no mention in the report about. I think it talks about access onto West Street, but again, it comes right up and abuts to the westerly junction onto the A120. And without knowing the size of the stadium, how much extra traffic is that going to generate onto an already overcrowded, if not dangerous, A120? And as is stated in the officer's report, this is at a very, quote, early stage in paragraph 3.78, and it is also said that it's difficult to assess the impact of these proposals without a development scheme. Now, I can appreciate that at the site allocation we wouldn't have a full development scheme, but we have no indication whatsoever of the size of this, and therefore I think it would be premature to make an allocation now. If we can get some further information and it could come back to us, then I would, I think that could reduce some of the concerns about this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'm going to assume, although officers will correct me, that matters like the size of a stadium and so on would be for further down the line planning.
It would be determined through a planning application, but what the submission says is it says, and forgive me, football is not really one of my things. So it says it's looking for an FA national ground grading category B, which the FA says is a minimum capacity of 3,000 with a potential to increase to 4,000 in the future. So that's the sort of size of stadium that the submission suggests they're looking for.
If I may add, we are in discussion with the promoters of the site, and they are quite open to any changes that officers suggest to the scheme. I think the overall plan is that they want to improve facilities, not particularly expand the football club. So it would be operationally, it'd be similar to how it operates now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's very helpful to get some understanding of what all the coloured bits mean. I'm quite sympathetic to the housing, at least on the green and the dark red bit, but definitely not the purple bit. I went past the site in Kelvedon on Coggeshall Road yesterday, where they're building right down to the river, and the impact's very significant. They've ripped out all of the vegetation on one side of the riverbank, which is quite shocking actually, how that's been allowed to create a new access. And I definitely think that we shouldn't be allowing the housing to go that close to the river, and also obviously for ecological reasons. The River Blackwater is an extremely important ecological corridor. We shouldn't be building that close to it. I'm very sympathetic to the idea of this housing and sports improvement. That's a good mix. However, it's really difficult on this because A, there's some confusion, as the speaker said, about what is exactly being proposed. But secondly, the sports is not contiguous with the housing. You've got the yellow bit separating it, and the sports is going in the worst possible ecological place, right next to the river, where you're going to have floodlit sports pitches, and it doesn't matter how well you design them, that is going to have an impact on the ecology right down in the river valley. It's also, in terms of transport, pretty much the most unsustainable location because it's the furthest from the village centre. It's going to be almost entirely car reliant unless some people come by public transport, and obviously some might. But it sort of sticks right out into the countryside and into the river valley. So I think if it's a bit like the last one. If you had the green and the red site for the housing and the the blue land is where the yellow is, I could probably go for it. But as it stands, I can't.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott.
Just to clarify, the green bit on the previous map was about 1 hectare, and the red bit was 1.5 hectares, and that has a combination of having capacity for 50 dwellings. So the proposed capacity in the report is 55. So there should be capacity within the areas without touching the purple area for the development. And the discussions with the developers so far are early, and we can suggest moving the whole proposal close to the road or perhaps towards Griggs Farm. The area is large enough to accommodate a variety of schemes. Avoiding the floodplain would be a priority, and as you can see from this map, there are sections in flood zone 2, and it would be desirable not to have any additional impact on the floodplain.
Thanks, Gary. I think that's helpful. So again, those are matters which might change and come forward with planning through the planning route. Yep. Yes. Okay. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much. Just carrying on from some of the points that Councillor Abbott made. I noticed, I remember that Councillor Thorogood referred to the potential for the Environment Agency to have a flood alleviation scheme. Are we aware of that? What are the implications of that? Does it have a material impact on our considerations this evening?
Having spoke to the promoters of the scheme, they understand that the Environment Agency have long proposed this river modification, and they would only require the car park use temporarily, and it would be handed back over to developers. So in a future iteration of this scheme, I suspect that we would be able to include the car park within the development. Whether or not we can recommend it for any construction will require consideration through the planning process.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you put the other map up, Alan, with the different colours? That's it. So on the mauve bit, how many houses are proposed for that?
Okay. So the developer has put forward the whole site, and we've taken a conservative view with the capacity. So if we were to include all 3 parts, we would have a capacity much higher than 55 dwellings. At 55 dwellings, you could accommodate the whole scheme without using any of the mauve colour area.
So, okay, here we go. Let's try it. So I will move the recommendation to approve this, omitting the mauve piece. Take that out. Yeah,
Right.
the bottom one.
Okay, right, fine. Can I just find a seconder for that? That's Councillor Martin. Councillor Parker, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to just follow up on the point that one of the speakers made, and Mr. Bevan, I think, if I remember correctly. It's just at the final part of his statement, he said that the map does not yet show the full area needed for the football facilities. Could you just comment on that? Maybe it's because all we need to do is just show the whole area allocated for informal recreation, is that right? Okay. Sarah's nodding.
I believe the maps in the committee pack has the whole Griggs Farm, excluding the business use, as a formal and informal recreation. And as the scheme moves forward, it would be desirable to shrink that designation so that it only encompasses the area that's being redeveloped for the stadium.
Oh, sorry, I left my mic on. So does that mean that it would no longer have the designation as informal or formal recreation, or would that whole area, this yellow area and blue area, would that all be allocated within local plan as informal and informal recreation? Don't quite understand, sorry.
Yeah, we'll have to be careful with how we'll have to be taking an iterative approach, and we will come up with a policy that secures the development, that secures the right capacity as we move forward through different iterations of the local plan. So we think that informal and formal recreation is the right designation now, but not at this scale. We think that we would like to exclude all the areas that's retained as use for agricultural use as open white land, open countryside. We'll have to also take in other members' considerations about moving the location so that it's more contiguous with the existing settlement. So we'll develop the scheme further. We may not need as much land as they are asking for, and we'll take an iterative approach to the allocations.
It does sound as though the developer is open to discussion on what goes where, which is, I think, encouraging. Councillor Walsh.
Just on a point of information, Councillor Thorogood referred to the Environment Agency and flood alleviation. It's not so much the area of the car park, but in fact there have been a number of meetings in Coggeshall, and I've had a meeting with it's a very large scheme on land owed to the south of the Blackwater, which would extend largely from Coggeshall towards Bradwell and up towards Cuthedge Lane beyond the hamlet, a 20-year scheme. Where the Environment Agency under the so-called Community Benefits Scheme, and with Blackwater Aggregates as a third party. So it would actually completely change the landscape of the southern slope of up towards to the south. So it's much more than the car park. I wonder, I can sort of sense some of the comments that have been made, and just as we've amended or suggested had an amendment on to leave out the purple area, and given what Gary has just said in terms of planning, and it's stated very clearly in the report that there's much more land here than is needed. Could we, as part of this amendment, consider that we also suggest a reasonable reduction in the land area required for the informal stroke formal recreation, because otherwise we would be allocating on a blank check. We don't know what's going to happen to the rest of the area.
Yes, Sarah, do you want to come in? And then
I think we need to let the I think we'll take the developers here listening to this debate, and it's obviously a public meeting. We will take that away and discuss that with them, and we will try and develop more detail on the proposal, so that when we're coming back as the local plan process has progressed, we can take that comment on board.
Yes, I'm not sure that we want to be quite as restrictive at this very early stage. Councillor Bowes-Flint, have your hand
Just
up.
on a point of order, Madam Chairman, mine wasn't an amendment, mine was a motion.
Sorry, it was a motion. Yes, I've got it down as that you have moved it, and Councillor Martin has. Right, okay, right. Okay, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, so right, we got rid of the purple bit. That's good. I'm happy with that. So back to the light blue bit. I'm seeing a load of oblongs on there. That's about as good as I can do from this distance with my eyesight. Are they all different types of pitches, practice pitches? So, okay, I'm getting nods. So in that case, how can we say that we're going to negotiate with the developer to reduce the area? Because if that's what they want to do, that's taking up the whole of that area. And that's now the stumbling block for me. I can't support that intensive a use, that close to the river and all the ecology, the floodlighting that will come with it. But if we're saying we can move that further north, nearer the road. And if we're saying that that's not as big an area as we need, then I think it's doable. But as it stands, that is a very big chunk of countryside right next to the river. That's my problem at the minute.
Just to also clarify, we obviously will have to engage with Sport England, and so there's a question around what's need. What this is the developer aspiration at this stage versus what is reasonable in terms of need. So we will have those discussions as the local plan process is progressing with Sport England as well, to ensure that what's being provided is what is needed, rather than a sort of a more aspirational kind of form of development. So I think that's where the scope of that may change, Councillor Abbott, if that helps.
Okay. Right, I think we've had a pretty good discussion on this one. So at the moment I have Councillor Bowes-Flint has moved that land south of West Street is allocated for housing minus the purple patch, I'll call it that, and that land at Griggs Farm is allocated as formal and informal recreation. Councillor Martin is happy to second that. So could I have a show of hands on that, please? Right, thank you. Those against? Abstentions? Right, thank you. That has been carried, members. Thank you. Right, we will now move back to the top of the agenda to page 11 for recommendation 1, which is COG 2080 West Street Vineyard. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a 0.2 hectare site, and the developer is only proposing 48 dwellings. It's a small greenfield site on agricultural land in a form of vineyard, south of West Street. It's adjacent to the complete Dutch nurseries development. The vineyard business has been scaled back over the years, and it's now considered non-productive. The area is designated as green buffer in the agricultural neighbourhood plan, and there was a previous application for 4 dwellings, which was refused at appeal in 2023. The inspector cited harm to character, conservation area and conflict with the neighbourhood plan. Increasing to 8 dwellings is unlikely to resolve these issues. In fact, it may worsen them. And the site is below the allocation thresholds anyway, so it's not recommended for allocation. So recommendation 1, that was.
Okay, that's fine. Right, Councillor Martin.
I recommend
Right, seconded by Councillor Bowes-Flint. Does that meet with agreement? Right, thank you, members. Right, moving on, 2081, land north and south of Coggeshall Football Ground.
This is a proposal for 2 separate parcels of land, one piece north and one piece south of the existing football ground. Without going into the characteristics of the site, that's in the report. It's thought that there would be access and noise conflicts with the ongoing football club operations, especially on match days. There's no suggestion on replacement recreational land, so the northern parcel is a designated formal and informal recreation, and once that gets extinguished, there's no proposal to replace that. So as such, this is not recommended for allocation. So that's recommendation 2.
Right. Yes, Councillor Cunningham.
Happy to move officer's recommendation for refusal.
Seconder in several places. That meet agreement? Yes. Okay, fine. Thank you. Right, recommendation 3, 2082, 10 Fearing Road, Coggeshall.
So this is a 0.14 hectare site that can accommodate around 3 dwellings. It's residential garden land on Fearing Road at the end of the Ribbon development. It's flat with no major constraints. There's limited visibility with conservation area due to established boundaries. Site is well enclosed by hedges and mostly hidden from public view. The existing residential access can be used with some improvement to visibility displays. However, there are no footpaths or street lighting on Fearing Road, and the national speed limit applies. A previous application for 3 dwellings was withdrawn, but it was substantially different to the current proposal. Nevertheless, the site is below the residential allocation threshold and it's not recommended for allocation.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you. To Gary, happy to move officer recommendation for for non-allocation.
Right, seconded in several places. Does that meet agreement? Yes, it does. Thank you. Recommendation 4, 2083, land at Marks Tay.
Yeah, this is
This is being deferred.
122 hectares, which can accommodate around 3,000 dwellings in a really awkward line. This is part of a new settlement proposal east of Coggeshall. I think it's in Colchester. But it's too large to be assessed, so the recommendation is deferred.
Yes, that's, yes, thank you. Yes.
Just a quick point on that. Is it all in Colchester? I'm just seeing the way it curbs round Surrox.
No.
No.
Oh,
No.
so there's some of it is in ours.
So all of the area that's visible on screen is in Braintree District.
Oh, right.
But part of it in Coggeshall is not visible, so it's probably the bit in the middle, really, and north of the
Sorry,
site.
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Right, okay, I think, yes, moved, seconded, and I'm sensing agreed, we defer that one, right. Now, we've already done recommendation 5 and 6, so we will move on to recommendation 7, land north of West Street.
This site is west of Coggeshall. There are 2 different proposals on the same plot of land. 3.77 hectares of employment land and a separate proposal for 45 dwellings. The site is a mix of greenfield and previously developed land because it was a former plant centre, plant growing centre, I believe, with some existing structures. Access is from West Street with a public right-of-way nearby, but relatively unaffected. It has good pedestrian, cycle and bus access to Coggeshall. There are nearby Grade 2 listed buildings which are visible due to open boundaries. And it's identified in the landscape character assessment as a medium site with reasonable capacity for change. But there are open views from the public rights-of-way and from West Street. Landscaping proposed to the west, but it's unlikely to fully mitigate harm to the character. It's not a logical extension to any settlement. And due to landscape harm, residential character and heritage impact, this site is not recommended for allocation.
Okay, Councillor Cunningham, you
Thank you, Chairman.
Move.
Happy to move
Move.
officer recommendation for non-allocation.
seconded, Councillor Walsh, and agreed, yeah, okay, thank you, members. Recommendation 8 is, I think, the same site, but it is
For
employment,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So recommendation A is the employment proposal. This would be 18 light industrial units within use class E and includes a turning circle, parking and landscaping. The majority of the development would be behind the existing residential dwellings with new tree planting to screen views from the east and north. Views from the west would remain as it is now. Access would be widened, resulting in some biodiversity loss because of a planting of a line of trees, but there is land available for biodiversity net gain and drainage provision. The 2015 employment land needs assessment is cited by the developer. However, this has been superseded by the 2024 employment land review. The 2024 ELR finds that there's limited need for Class E1 new office space, but it does not support this site for employment use. This is because of concerns about congestion on West Street and access to the A120. Officers have identified harm to landscape character, potential heritage impacts similar to the residential site, and as such, this site is not recommended for allocation for employment land.
Councillor Cunningham?
Move Officer
Move, seconded, Councillor Bowles-Flint, and agreed, yes, good. Thank you.
This is land north of West Street, which is 62 hectares and has a capacity of 600 dwellings. This will be deferred to a later meeting after the summer.
Right.
So recommendation 9.
Yes, agreed, that's good. Now, we're going to skip down to recommendation 12, which is on page 21 of your agendas, site 2090, the Abbey, Coggeshall. And we'll come back to some others once Councillor Walsh has left the room.
Okay. So this is in 2 parts. I've assessed them in eastern parcel and a western parcel to help break it down a bit. It's largely greenfield and is located on land historically associated with the Abbey. The eastern parcel first. Yep, okay, so it's on the left. There are a lot of designations on this parcel. It's capable of accommodating around 345 dwellings, and the developer says that can be built at 30 dwellings per year. Access would be achieved from Coggeshall Road, where the implementation of visibility space would result in the loss of an established tree and hedgerow. The site falls within medium to low sensitivity. The site is relatively flat with visual containment by mature landscaping and several interior field boundaries lined with mature trees and hedges. The site is crisscrossed by public rights of way, including the Essex Way. Due to this site's historic link to the Abbey, there are heritage impact concerns and a heritage impact assessment will be required. Part of the site is also identified within an archaeological area, so further investigations may be required. It's also identified as a green amenity area and a tranquil policy area in the Coggeshall neighbourhood plan. And I'll conclude later. So moving to the western parcel, this proposal is for 18 dwellings on open fields north of Abbey Lane. It's behind a Grade 1 listed chapel, St Nicholas Chapel. Access would be via the road that accommodates the Abbey. However, this is unadopted, unlit and poorly maintained. The site is identified as having low capacity in landscape character assessment, as it provides a rural setting to Coggeshall, which is north of the river. Development would be isolated from existing housing and poorly related to the settlement. It would alter historic field boundaries and have a likely adverse impact on the character area, particularly when observed from users of Essex Way. The site joins St Nicholas Chapel and lies within the Coggeshall Conservation Area and is part of a scheduled ancient monument. Both sites have a strong historic relationship with the Abbey and potential for archaeological interests. Development would likely cause harm to heritage assets, landscape character, and have poor visual relationship with the existing town. As such, these sites are not recommended for allocation.
Happy to move Officer recommendation for non-allocation.
Seconded by Councillor Walsh, I think, just, I assume, yes, is that agreed, everybody? Yeah, okay, good. Right, next is recommendation 13, 2091, land at Pointwell Lane.
This is adjacent to Coggeshall Hamlet. It's 1.4 hectares and can accommodate 30 to 50 dwellings. This proposal is also in 2 parcels, but the parcel within the fluvial floodplain of the River Blackwater is not it's not assessed and considered. The parcel to the west is within a residential curtilage. Coggeshall Hamlet has limited facilities and no development boundary. The Coggeshall town is 1 kilometre away by a narrow unlit footpath. A low-density residential scheme is proposed aimed to be sensitive to local character. So, as previously mentioned, the parcel to the east is within flood zone 2 and fails the sequential test. The parcel in the residential curtilage includes ponds, swimming pool, pastoral lands. It's classified as previously developed land and is well enclosed by mature trees and hedgerows. But due to its unsuitable access to Pointwell Lane, which is unadopted, lacks pavements and has limited passing points, this site is not recommended for development.
Councillor Walsh?
Could I just add very briefly, I strongly support this recommendation. It would really affect the rural and agricultural character of the hamlet, and particularly the eastern portion going along the Blackwater would really reduce the environmental quality and amenity of that area. I would be very happy to move, accept the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bowes-Flint and agreed, everybody? Yes, thank you. Right, now we need to skip to recommendation 17, which is on page 26, 2095, land to the north side of Colchester Road.
This is an employment proposal to the northeast of Coggeshall Village. It's a flat greenfield site in arable use with no major ecological, archaeological or heritage constraints aside from field boundaries. It's not in the landscape character assessment, but it's, well, reasonably enclosed, although there are exposed views from the A120. Surrounding uses include agriculture and residential. It's proposed that B8 storage and distribution use is accommodated here, but this would significantly alter the rural character and appear incongruous with nearby residential dwellings. The site is not contiguous with Coggeshall's development boundary and would appear isolated due to separation by the A120. Direct access to the A120 raises concerns over highway safety, visibility and suitability, and the site's been assessed in the employment land review, and the consultants have not recommended this site for allocation. Officers, taking into account the ELR and the site's characteristics, also do not recommend this site for allocation.
Councillor Abbott?
Yeah, I'll move officer's recommendation, and just to say the junction just below left of that site is one I was referring to earlier, the crossover junction.
Yeah.
The idea that you'd have vans and lorries coming on and off the A120 there with 60 mile an hour traffic sweep, well it's 50 now the speed limit, but nevertheless fast moving traffic sweeping around that bend, your crash would be in the first few days.
Yes, yeah, I don't disagree with that. So that's been moved. Seconded, Councillor Cunningham. Quick show of hands, please. Thank you, members. Right, next recommendation 18, 2098.
This is land between Tilkey Road and the Coggeshall bypass. It's 11.63 hectares. We've calculated it as being able to accommodate 290 dwellings. The development the development would support Marks Hall Estate as they own the land, and say that any development here would fund improvements to its arboretum and visitor facilities. However, Tilkey Road is a narrow single lane with no pavements north of Westfield Drive. Surrounding land uses include residential, education, agricultural. A cluster of homes would be developed in the middle of the development. The land is mostly, well, it's flat, but does undulate, and it is in arable use. There's a small woodland area to the northwest sloping down to Robbins Brook, which is also a local wildlife site. There are a few internal boundaries, and access, however, is proposed from the A120. That's unavailable. Other accesses, such as from Colne Road, would depend on third-party cooperation, which is not within the red line boundaries, so it's currently considered to be inaccessible. As such, this site cannot be recommended for allocation.
Yep, and seconded, yes, thank you, in several places, and agreed. That's good, that's fine. Now, the next one is Stock Street, which we've done. So we will move to recommendation 20, which starts at the very bottom of page 28.
Okay, this is 0.2 hectares and can accommodate 2 dwellings. It's a small site on residential garden land classed as PDL. The proposal is for, the proposal can be delivered between 2026 and 27, so it will help our short-term land supply. The site is flat with no known flood, ecological, archaeological or heritage constraints. It's surrounded by trees and hedges typical of residential curtilage. Development would not materially extend built form into the countryside, but the resulting density could appear out of character. Access is via Old Road, which is unadopted. There's no pavement and no nearby facilities. The proposal would likely result in a car-dependent development, and it's outside of the defined development boundary for Surrix. So it wouldn't be possible to extend the development boundary to encompass it without encompassing quite a few other dwellings. As such, the site is not recommended for allocation or for boundary inclusion.
Thanks, Gary. Would you like to just do the next one, and then I'll take a vote on both of those together,
Of course. So the next one is similar to the previous one, but it's on the eastern side of Old Road rather than the western side. This is a small site on open residential garden land, which is 50% laid to lawn. 50% of the site is heavily vegetated. This is also flat and PDL with few constraints. It's bordered by trees and hedges, typical of residential curtilage. Again, this development is likely to be car dependent due to limited infrastructure at Surrix. And it's not recommended to amend the boundary to include this site either.
Right, I just
Propose we accept officer's recommendation.
on those two, right, and seconded by Councillor Abbott. Oh, yeah, oh, sorry, Councillor Abbott, apologies.
Are we keeping the, I presume the black line is the development boundary around Surrix? Are we keeping that? Yeah, because the original old Surrix site, of course, next to O120 remains a brownfield, an open brownfield site that looks a bit run down. So presumably with this development boundary, that does help. One day that might get redeveloped.
Right, okay. Right, so that was, those two sites have been moved from not being allocated. A seconder, thank you, and agreed, yeah, okay, good. Right, now, Councillor Walsh, you're leaving us, not permanently, I hope you're coming back, but because we need to go back to recommendation 10, which is on page 20, 2088, land west of Kelvedon Road. Actually, it's on page, starts on page 19, sorry. Yep, okay.
Thank you, Chair. It's land west of Kelvedon Road. It's 1.9 hectares and can accommodate 47 dwellings. This would be in a ribbon-style development, or could be a short cul-de-sac. And it's between Coggeshall Town and Coggeshall Hamlet on the western side of, I think it's Kelvedon Road, yep. It's a greenfield site which is part of a larger arable field. Development would introduce residential character into the open countryside with a weak indefensible boundary. Access would be possible, or multiple accesses would be possible directly fronting onto Kelvedon Road. A ribbon development would require additional loss of boundaries and trees. A cul-de-sac development would result in less loss, but would be out of character. Services in Coggeshall are accessible by sustainable movement. but the development would reduce the physical and visual separation between Coggeshall Town and Coggeshall Hamlet, risking coalescence. The site also lies within a dark sky area and green buffer area in the neighbourhood plan, and the main concerns are loss of character, visual separation, inappropriate layout, and the benefits of housing and green infrastructure are not thought to outweigh these harms, so it's not recommended for allocation.
Shall we carry on unless I see any hands up, and then we'll do an en bloc vote at the end unless anybody has a comment. Yes, thanks, Gary, if you carry on.
So this is also called Land North of West Street. It's 29 hectares and 280 dwellings. It wraps around Highfields Farmstead and can be delivered at 55 dwellings per year. It's mostly arable land with some overgrown meadows, and it's defined by boundary hedges and trees with undulating topography sloping towards Robbins Brook. This is within multiple parcels of landscape capacity, though most parcels do have a medium capacity for change. One of them does have a medium to low capacity for change. It's also identified in a green buffer in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan, which seeks to prevent coalescence and protect the village setting. And it's also within 3 different protected views in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan. Heritage constraints include proximity to the conservation area, Grade 2 listed Highfields Farmstead, and the Isinglass factory. Primary access can be achieved from West Street, and it does have reasonable pedestrian, cycle and public transport links. A previous mixed-use application was dismissed in 2017 due to harm to heritage assets and landscape characters, despite the tilted balance being engaged at the time. The current proposal is larger in scale than previously considered and likely to have greater or similar adverse effects on heritage, landscape and character. As such, this site is not recommended for allocation.
Okay.
Then you need to go to 2092.
Next one, 2092.
This is 2.65 hectares, which can accommodate 100 dwellings. It's a greenfield site located to the north of Abbey Lane, and there are 2 different promotions on this site. I think both are covered in the report under separate codes. This one is the larger one, I believe. It's enclosed by mature trees and hedgerows, but development would compromise the rural-urban fringe and alter local character. Access from Abbey Lane is proposed, but this is unadopted, poorly serviced and unlit. A small area to the north is within flood zone 2, but it's unlikely to affect capacity. The site also has implications for the Coggeshall conservation area and is near Grade 1 and Grade 2 listed buildings. It falls within Protected View 15 and Green Amenity Area 4 in the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan. This requires sensitive landscaping and protection of heritage and landscape characters. The main issues include harm to heritage assets, change of character and unsuitable access. As such, this site is not recommended for allocation.
Okay. 2094.
2093.
Oh, sorry, 2093, yes.
This is also called Land at Abbey Lane, but it's just the western parcel. It's 0.9 hectares, so it can accommodate about 25 dwellings. This is a small alternative. It has the same characteristics, and the main issues that affect the larger site also apply to this site. So lack of suitable access, changing character of the area, impact on heritage assets, and this site is not recommended for allocation.
Fine. And 2094.
This is southwest of Coggeshall.
For allocation of all those,
Right.
thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Bowes, Flint, and all sorts of people. So could I have show of hands on that? Right, thank you, members. That finishes the Coggeshall site assessments. Now, yes, we need to get Councillor Walsh back. Before we have item 6, which is the economic and retail policies, Alan and Sarah have an update on where we are with housing numbers so far and targets. Would you like a short break before that? And I mean with the greatest respect, but I need you to concentrate on what Alan is going to say on numbers and targets. So if you'd like a 5-minute break now, then we'll have the update. Good. Next. Okay. Thank you. Right, members, thank you. So, because we've reached the stage where we finished this early examination of the small sites, the villages and so on, officers are going to give just a quick update on where we are with the housing numbers against the target and so on. They're going to do that now, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. So, Alan, I think you're taking this one to
Yes.
start with.
Thank you, very much. Okay, if I get on to our next slide. Right, slide one. So this is, in order to provide us with a steady housing trajectory, the local plan should be averaging about 1,264 dwellings per year. When considering the current trajectory, which is the darker green line, which is going rather worryingly downwards, that is the existing local plan trajectory without any of the additional draft allocations added onto it. Bear with me again, sorry. I should get bifocals one of these days. There, that's the one. So when right, so what you can see there is obviously with the existing local plan and the new housing target, we don't have enough to meet our identified or potential housing supply moving forward under the standard method. All right, so in terms of the housing numbers we've identified so far, the committee has identified approximately 1,509 houses on new sites. That is updated as of about 10 minutes ago following the decisions made this evening. So that means that the target figure of 18,959, which is based on 1,149 over 15 years. The standard method figure has increased from 1,115. The figure of existing housing trajectory sites, which is 9,047, that means we're going to need to identify an additional 8,484 houses on larger sites. However, when looking at the draft trajectory and the profile of sites identified so far, it suggests we may have a 5-year supply issue, as you can see on the green line on this chart here, particularly year one, which is a little bit worrying because of the speed it requires to get new completions. So we're talking about completions here, not new sites. And year 5 as well, which is actually just touching back down again to the 5-year. At 5-year, it just hits what we would be required to provide that year, bearing in mind that that figure is likely to change. So we have a potential issue there. So for 26-27, we'll probably be looking at needing to find between 200 and 250 additional completions, but the situation improves years 2 to 4. It's also necessary to bring to the committee's attention the findings of the recent Mill Lane Cressing appeal, which, whilst the inspector did conclude that we had a 5-year supply of housing, he basically said that she said that we wouldn't have one in 2026. This means we're also likely to get some further speculative applications, probably from February next year. Right, so if we go on to... We did have 2 versions of these graphs today, but we've narrowed that down now, so we've only got that. So, when considering the trajectory and the implications of the 5-year housing supply, we will most likely need the committee to reconsider some sites of a small and medium nature, which could potentially be delivered within the first 5 years of the plan, accommodating up to 250 dwellings. As well as considering the large-scale site options to identify the longer-term requirement of 8,484. So, for large sites, it is going to be necessary for us to identify multiple sites. This is because we will need to significantly boost our yearly completion rates for the district. This suggests that we're going to need at least 3 large sites to be identified, which are capable of providing a minimal addition 700 plus completions per year from 2033-34, rising up to 1,150 new completions per year by 38-39. So these higher completion rates will be necessary towards the end of the plan period. However, it's likely that our plan will have been reviewed by then, so there could be some other options being explored, which may not mean that higher figure would be needed, but we would have potential other alternatives. So we're going to ask members, basically officers will go through the existing sites that have been considered, and we'll also ask members if they have any suggestions for sites which they considered which perhaps they thought perhaps were borderline for allocation, and officers will add these to a report for consideration later this year. Any questions?
Councillor Cunningham.
I just remember, and I think we've referred to it in earlier meetings since the local plan refresh, when we were submitting the evidence again for the part one of the now existing local plan, we talked around about the autumn of 2019. We spent a great deal of time talking about the housing delivery assessment requirement. I can't remember the precise term, but basically it was meaning putting that additional buffer on to ensure the deliverability is there. Presumably, these are figures with that taken into account then?
There is, yes. Yes, it's, we've added the 10% buffer. When we look at the, so there's two lines there. The top, I think that's the yellowy orange, so an orange line, apologies. That's the 10%. So that's 1149 plus 10%.
Councillor Abbott.
On the basis that every little helps, Madam Chairman, I'll make the same point as I made before. We allocated almost nothing north of Braintree. I mean, literally, almost nothing. We're allocating or have had to allocate due to sites which were granted on appeal: Silver End, Coggeshall, Kelvedon, Braintree and Witham are going to take a lot. I really think if we're going to revisit anything, it is some of those sites of a few dozen houses in the northern villages, for two reasons. One, because we need the numbers, and secondly, because I don't understand how we're not providing any housing for future young people and families in those villages. I mean, we went through each one of them, and virtually every one of them was zero. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. I mean, the fact is, so we need over 8,000 to find. The very large strategic sites which we're looking at in September and October, you know, what we allocate from there obviously don't know yet. They will take quite a long time to deliver. We do need some of the smaller sites, because apart from this, they're quicker to deliver. So that will help us with our 5-year supply, because as things stand at the moment, we are going to lose that 5-year supply next year, Alan, do we think? Yeah. Which is slightly precarious. I don't think we can count on the government ignoring that, because, you know, they will see that we are making progress with our local plan, and they've got a lot of other things to think about. But in terms of appeals, certainly inspectors will note that. So it does leave us in a precarious position. So yes, as Councillor Abbott says, I think, you know, we need perhaps to go away, have a look at some of the sites that we rejected earlier, and have a rethink, and officers will do the same. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I did agree with Councillor Abbott before, and I think that we need to look at the other side of Braintree that haven't had any allocations at all, really. They've all been dismissed, because this site has taken more than treble its amount that it needed to, and the villages are almost becoming unidentifiable now as a village. Certainly Cressy has. Silver End's most probably going that way, and so is Rivenall, to be fair. But what worries me more than anything is, and I hear what the government wants to do, and I used to hear what the Conservative government used to want to do as well. But what I don't see is the people to build the houses. And the actual building of housing has actually slowed down now. So whilst we might sit here and say we've got to find another 8,000, you're lucky if you can find a builder at the moment to build another 100. So good luck to the officers in finding somebody to actually carry out any more development than what we've got at the minute, because what developers are doing is slowing down the sites, and they're taking for absolute ever to build. They'll build one, and then they leave the rest of the site. And so it is not a good situation to be in. But I also support that this district needs more housing, and it needs more housing for young people as well. And it also needs, and officers have heard me say this before, more bungalows built, so that the bigger houses can be freed up for the families, and the elderly people live in smaller accommodation if they so wish. So there's all sorts of swings and roundabouts, but I get it, it must be so frustrating for the officers to have to find something that's almost impossible, but I think we should revisit some of the sites north. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I know there is certainly a manpower shortage. There was, I don't know if there still is, also a materials shortage, bricks, which is holding things up. I've got Councillor Cunningham next, then Councillor Parker.
I don't disagree with anything Councillor Bowersland has said, and once again we see the perpetual disconnect between government's high ambitions and actually giving the levers to actually unlock the ambition. And I think it's a bit of an old humbug we in this part of the world have been sucking on for quite some time. But having said that, and despite the fact that the government has set an ambition to unlock housing development and in major numbers, is there any latitude given or any emerging glimmer of hope in any up-to-date legislation or guidance that if councils are prepared to commit to big sites on the basis that the long-term benefits are there, social infrastructure, deficits, some of those issues addressed, that actually their 5-year housing supply, if there are short, medium-term frailties in that, they'll be given greater protection from an inspector because of the ambition and the commitment to unlock bigger size. Because after all, no one can put a gun to a developer's head and say build, can they?
No. Okay. Sarah, do you want to come back?
I'd love to say that was likely, but what I have seen with from a conference earlier this year is apparently the appeal rate has gone from 25% allowed to 65% allowed under this new MPPF. So I think whilst this really permissive MPPF is in place, I'm afraid there isn't any respite for the authorities that are pro-growth.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you. Just a few comments, Madam Chairman. I think one of the issues, in addition to lack of people and lack of materials, is price. I think that is, some things that developers are finding challenging, that they can't actually build at a cost which people are able to afford. So that's another challenge. But that's just a sort of comment, really. Just in terms of finding, so I've noted that we're looking at 200 to 250 to get us over this initial hump of sites that can be delivered quickly. I think it's worth us going back and looking at which sites parish councils were supportive of, which we decided not to allocate, because there are certainly some sites I can remember that parish councils were happy to see developed, and we decided not. The other thing is we have been using a threshold of we have made a decision we won't consider any sites below. Was the threshold 10?
10.
It was 10. Yeah. Should we revisit that?
I think that's good.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is you don't get Section 106 on less than 10. Right. So you're not allowed to secure it. So I think there's a conscious decision that 10 gets us the infrastructure contributions towards.
Can I just return on that? I mean, the counter to that is that with the smaller villages, anything, for many of them, anything more than 10 is not going to be supported. So, I mean, I appreciate, that was interesting to understand that threshold, actually. I didn't realise that was the case. Makes perfect sense. But maybe sometimes it's worth not getting Section 106 to get our houses by. Anyway.
Councillor Walsh and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks very much for the analysis and the figures. Within our the process is sort of reactive in the call for sites process. We're reacting to proposals by definition that come forward. Have we done an analysis of where there might be some capacity on brownfield and infill, and under the current regulations and new regulations, if there's anything we might do to more actively encourage a greater conversion of that into real homes?
Yeah, if I come back on that, yes. So we do have a strategic housing and availability assessment, which will be reported to this committee in September. That includes pretty much every site that we are aware of in the district. We are also allowed to have a windfall allowance, which takes into account a provision for sites that may come forward which we're not currently aware of. That would add to it. If we do change development boundaries and not allocate a site, those houses would eventually come into the housing trajectory anyway once they've got planning permission, so would also count. The housing trajectory has to be updated regularly as well, so if some sites come forward, say a business closes and converts to something else, then yes, those sorts of things will be factored into the trajectory. It's just when we get to local planning examination, one of the things we'll have to do is demonstrate as much as possible that we've got this sort of early year supply in the bag, as it were, and we would need to be able to convince an inspector of that. Otherwise, what would probably happen is we would have some competing sites. They would be able to make their argument to an inspector, and perhaps some sites that this committee wouldn't be particularly happy with being allocated may get allocated through the local examination process if we couldn't convince that inspector that what we had identified in the plan would be sufficient to meet that supply.
Councillor Cunningham.
Just a final observation, it might not even be one for answering tonight, but obviously with the spectre of the 5-year housing supply constantly hanging over us, have we pulled all levers internally in terms of sites that have been coming forward for with applications in the existing local plan? Is there any capacity issues or any internal processes that could be deployed to ensure that they come to committee quicker, for the possibility of swifter approval and therefore bringing development starting sooner rather than later?
It's a good point, and actually, even aside from that, sites like Straits Mill, for example, yes, which has permission, which hasn't started, it would be so helpful if one or two big sites like that were actually to get going. Yes, sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, that is something we will pick up with colleagues in DM to ensure that we've got the right resource in, but some of the delays with some of the large sites which push these numbers back a bit is that Straits Mill's an example of a slow one. Hayswood is the other one. That the land ownership stuff just takes a long time to resolve. So we're pushing where we can.
Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Sort of just following on from that point, and it's quite frustrating because to a certain extent, sort of developers control the 5-year supply because not us, in regards them building out applications, and then because they're sort of slow on doing what they need to do, then we haven't got demonstrate a 5-year supply, which then they know kind of helps them out at appeals that we could lose. But then also, I guess that's what the part of the local plan process is, getting hopefully development where it should be. And I agree with the point in looking at north of Braintree and the villages and the like. Not just because the valid point that certain sort of areas have taken more than their fair share and are not sort of really what we would call villages anymore. But so I agree with that point. But the point is then we're looking to put the developments where they should be, whereas the stuff that then comes to will potentially, because we haven't got a 5-year land supply, then goes to appeal, and it's costing this authority money to defend them appeals because we want to put the right housing where it needs to be, and then we're losing more appeals. But then Sarah's sort of making the point that seems a national trend, not anything that sort of we're doing wrong. I think one of the biggest frustrations is we're told by national government housing,
but where are they supporting us with the infrastructure?
Yeah.
Yep.
And the A12 and the road decision is
Yep.
a perfect example. So they want the houses, but they don't want to give the areas the infrastructure to support that housing.
Yep.
So we're stuck in a place that this committee has to obviously provide housing, but it's frustrating that we're not getting the support nationally from them. Thank you.
We are between a rock and a hard place. Right, I don't see any more hands up comments on that. So I think, thank you to officers, that was helpful, but rather sobering. But certainly I think one of the ideas that we go back and have a look at sites which parish councils were in favour of, but which we refused is something worth doing. All right. Councillor Butland.
Dare I mention it, but had our part 1 of our previous local plan been accepted,
Yeah.
I think we might be in a much more different
A very
position.
different place, yeah.
And there may be some things there that we might wish to see whether that could be resurrected in some way.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, yes, Councillor Abbott.
Well, I can't let that go without saying that one of the Part 1 sites was a conurbation of 24,000 houses, which would have resulted in almost all the countryside between Stanway and Fearing being built on. And it actually slowed up the decision on the A12. The A12 might have gone forward had that site not been proposed.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, I think we will draw a line under this particular discussion for the moment. But anyway, food for thought around sites that we might just want to have a second look at. Okay, let's move on. Item 6 is the Economic and Retail Policies Review, which Alan is taking, I think.
Gary.
Oh, Gary, sorry. Sorry, Gary. Sorry.
I think we just this is not right, is it?
Yeah, there's something wrong with it.
What's that?
You went the wrong way. So.
Ah.
Don't keep going past.
Down.
Ah, okay, so up and down. It's a new ticker. Okay, so this is a review into the first 2 chapters of the Section 2, or formerly Section 2, Draft Local Plan. And it covers the topics of strong economy and shops and services, and includes policies from LPP2 to LPP15. It also incorporates some of the strategic policies from Section 1. New employment site allocations and deallocations are not discussed. These were reported at each draft allocation committee meeting. The full draft local plan, including all employment policies, will be reassembled for members' consideration in the autumn prior to a statutory formal consultation. Tables, LPP2 and LPP3 and LPP6 will be updated for the final draft version. So the methodology used is outlined in the report. Briefly, it consisted of updating policies to take into account updates to the MPPF since 2012, using the PAS toolkit. It includes feedback from issues and scoping consultation and feedback from development management and members. Relevant findings from evidence-based studies included the Economic Growth Strategy 2023, NEEBS delivering for North Essex, the Employment Land Review 24, and the Retail and Leisure Study 24. The alterations in the text are outlined in Appendix 1. Members should bear in mind the local plan policy objectives for the economy when considering the changes to the policies. For the economy, it's to support existing businesses and attract new employers by providing high-quality land, sustainable locations. And for retail, it's to support the evolving role of town centres, enabling a mix of retail and employment, community and cultural uses, while reinforcing Braintree Village and Braintree Retail Park. The PAS toolkit highlighted the need to define which policies are strategic, address the locational needs of different employment sectors, including knowledge-based industries, creative industries and logistics. Recognise rural business may require flexible locations beyond existing settlements. The economic growth strategy suggests that we prioritise supporting rural businesses, providing sufficient employment land and creating grow-on space for startups and SMEs. NEEB's economic goals don't currently support land allocations, but may do in the future, particularly around innovation spaces and R&D hubs. So for retail policies, the Retail and Leisure Study recommends supporting the evening and nighttime economy by repurposing vacant retail spaces, strengthening the sequential and impact tests in line with the MPPF, introducing a lower retail impact threshold of 1,000 square metres in Braintree and potentially 500 square metres elsewhere in the district, redefining town centre boundaries, although these changes are will be done through an iterative process and could be revealed in the autumn. Amendments have mostly been incorporated, except for boundary changes, which will come back once all the site assessments are complete. For the employment land review, a summary of the evidence shows that there's a need for 2.4 hectares of office land, but no additional requirement for industrial land. And office development should be prioritised to town centres or mixed-use developments with flexible SME space also supported. Policies should retain existing employment land, particularly in Braintree, Housestead and Whittam, and on LPP6 business parks. Support for rural workspaces and their conversions, e.g. from redundant farm buildings and light industrial and maker spaces, and support for logistics sector through infill and appropriately located new sites. And a cautious approach should be taken around non-industrial uses such as gyms and play spaces within industrial areas due to potential safety conflicts. This offers a comments and actions that are being considered are that no new town centre office proposals were submitted in core sites. SME and logistics sites will need to be considered as part of the parish or town site selection process, and infill and expansions on existing employment areas were generally supported. No new changes are proposed to Earls Colne and Coggeshall employment allocations, and policy LPP7 has been refined to allow greater flexibility for rural commercial uses without micromanagement as recommended by the ELR, and that amendments will allow more flexibility and has been changed in response to member and development management feedback. So going through the policies, would members like me to go through each of the policies in Appendix 1 page by page?
Do you think no?
Reflect on comments read through the camera.
Councillor Butland?
I don't know about going on. I have some comment on 4.3.
If I perhaps go through each page and ask for comments, would that be a
Yes,
suitable
maybe
approach?
that's a good, yes, yeah, okay.
I'm afraid the page numbers are different because of the formatting, but the paragraph numbers are the same.
Okay.
So this is paragraphs 3 to 6, 4.3 to 4.6. This is largely incorporating changes from the section 1 and incorporating it into section 2, while also updating the text.
Councillor Butler, was it 4.3 you wanted
Yes,
to?
4.3, Madam Chairman. I think we should make some reference there to Horizon 120 and also Skyline.
Yes.
Now, strictly speaking, it's not within the Braintree town. It's within the parish of Great Notley. How you show that, I don't know, but it ought to be acknowledged that Great Notley parish has got a considerable amount of employment land within its boundary.
Can I just agree with everything Councillor Butler said? To be pedantic, I think some of the employment land that considers down might be non-parish Braintree, actually. But the vast majority of it is, in, yes, those contentious arguments, but particularly the other side of the Hungry Horse pub, I think, in particular. But yeah.
Okay, all right. Yep, note that. Okay.
I'll move on.
Yes, yep.
This is unfortunately not. Oh, it's also part of the same. It's 4.6. So this is part of paragraph 4.6. 4.7, minor updates. Updates to this facts and the statistics at 4.9. 4.10, it's again updates to the statistics and the requirements. Removal of references to other authorities. 4.13 is a new paragraph that's a update in response to the MPPF changes. And then moving to the policies, it's proposed members that the table is taken out and replaced with a couple of lines to state the district's needs. I think there's an update to use classes as well. Paragraphs 4.14 and 4.15 are updates to the date and updates in response to the MPPF. And then paragraphs 4.17 is incorporating some of the other strategies that we are incorporating in the plan.
Oh, Councillor Parker, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Chair, no, don't worry. It's actually it's a typo actually. Well, I think it's a typo, but just on 4.17 there, competitiveness. Should we be saying establishing Braintree district as a location, or is it meant to just say Braintree?
I think it's from the original document, but happy to add Braintree district rather than just Braintree town. That makes sense. Thank you. Again, adding in a reference to other strategies that support economic development in the district. This is unchanged, so and then paragraphs 4.25 is a new paragraph which refers to grow-on spaces and the sort of types of industries that's referred to in the MPPF. The 4 changes here are minor updates, just to update the document. And I think this whole table will need to be reviewed. There are limited changes, but I think the table will be updated in accordance to the new sites that we've allocated for the site selection process. And the update will be updated as well. Moving on to the protective policies, there's a small update at the end of paragraph 4.29. and I think that's in response to the employment land review, to try and making sure that industrial uses do not conflict. And then another change to 4.31 to try and focus office uses to the town centre. But otherwise there are no changes to the main policy. This table will need to be updated in response to any losses or changes recorded over time. And then the next policy is on Kelvedon Park. No changes are proposed to this policy.
Councillor Abbott. Yeah.
Could I suggest that, and we know there's, the site owners just recently invited local councillors to discuss a planning application on training facilities. Given that the sensitivity of the site, particularly the back onto the River Blackwater, could it have the same or very similar lighting caveat as the next one does, 5A, Allshots Farm?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I see
Yeah,
what you mean.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, is that all right?
Yeah.
Officers, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Allshots Farm, policy LPP 5, no changes are proposed to LPP 5. Business parks, there's no changes proposed to the text, however the table will need to be updated. I believe there's a little bit of loss at Freshelford and possibly Whittam Town Centre.
I presume Horizon 120 will be added into that.
I think it's more of a LPP 3 employment area rather than a business park, because business parks, as stated in the preamble, it's more rural and business units, and it's specifically focused for offices and businesses.
In rural areas, not, that's just specifically just rural areas, yeah?
This policy is aimed at specifically more rural business parks.
Whittam Town Centre's not rural.
Well, no, it just seems...
Or Malton's Lane's not Whittam rural.
And it's
Yeah.
called Horizon 120 Business and Innovation Park.
It could be that we changed the preamble.
If I recall correctly from the previous version of the local plan, this the sites listed in this table had a different allocation identified on the proposals map. So they weren't a straight sort of blue B1, B2, B8. There was a specific policy that just tried to encourage the office type uses on these policies. So the majority of them are in rural areas like Stipple Bumstead, Earlscone, etc. But I think the idea of this policy was to encourage office uses specifically rather than general industry, if I remember correctly.
We need to do some redrafting.
Members, we can formulate the policy to give it better focus.
And we'll take away where best to reference Horizon 120. Yeah.
The leader's quite correct, is 100% in Great Notley as it's in Skyline. So, I stand corrected. I bow to superior knowledge, as I always should.
Okay. And then the next policy is rural enterprise. There are quite a few changes to this one. We made a change to paragraph 4.35 in response to the employment land review, and the development management suggested a change to the policy title so that it's now called commercial buildings within the countryside. The first part of the policy remains unchanged. That governs reconstruction and rebuilding on existing plot, but the policy has been amended here to allow for some expansion to existing employment uses in the countryside, subject to conditions D to F. And it does allow for more flexibility and would it result in sort of more making it easier to for the open countryside to be impacted by the development of new employment land. However, it does support rural businesses as recommended by the Employment Land Review.
Okay, Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, is this something we have to do flowing from the MPPF, or is this something that officers are recommending as a local initiative? Because I do have quite a lot of concerns about this. We've got, as I've said before, planning committee, quite a number of farm sites or areas associated with farms which have had conversions, some of them successful, some haven't been built out, some less so. The idea that those could become quite significant business parks in rural areas, I don't think is sustainable. They don't have, many of them don't have direct access in terms of cycling, public transport or walking. They're going to introduce heavier traffic onto rural roads, often in areas where there's substandard junctions or conflicts. They can sometimes be close to isolated rural houses, and I can think of several examples, I won't name them now. So, coming back to my original question, do we have to do this, or is it something that's a local policy?
No, I can confirm that this is a change not it's driven by a development management recommendation, and it's not driven by the MPPF. The MPPF says we need to fill any identified employment needs, which we have. It's in the Employment Land Review, but it's not necessary to find additional employment floor space. But this is in response to feedback, and it's a local initiative.
Thank you. Well, that clarifies. Yeah. Well, in that case, I do have concerns about it. I think it's too open-ended, and I think it risks us having substantial industrial type or business type sites coming forward in very rural areas, which really should be better located to the sustainable locations on the larger towns or villages.
Okay, Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Parker.
Yeah, no, I sympathise with Councillor Abbott's concerns, because it's all for promoting work opportunities in the countryside, rural enterprise, but also want to minimise heavy goods traffic chundering around very narrow country lanes. So is there some discretionary, informative or element that could go into the policy that perhaps addresses, where possible, unlocking sustainable transport? But I appreciate there is going to be some difficulties in terms of practicalities, but I think these things should always be something that are tested against and explored. But also something about the weight limits of vehicles that service it, the weight limit and quantity of vehicles that service these potential employment sites. So maybe prioritising businesses that don't need less than 7.5 tonnes or something of vehicles to support the functions of their business. I'm pretty sure that's going quite specific detail, but I think the principles behind some of that may allay some of the concerns that Councillor Abbott quite rightly articulates.
Yeah, Councillor Parker.
I think Councillor Cunningham's right. I think that the thing that concerns most people in the countryside when there are businesses in the countryside is the size of the vehicles that are using the roads. And I mean, there are sometimes container lorries literally going past my house, and it was quite a small road. But having said that, there is in the policy already a subparagraph A: the access and traffic generated development can be accommodated without adverse impacts on the local road network. So I think that is covered off. I don't quite understand why sometimes we end up having, I think it's because of it's the permitted development rights which are causing the problems, I think, where farm buildings particularly have been converted, and we can't do anything about conditioning the traffic. It's one of the main reasons why I hate permitted development rights. But I personally, I'm quite happy with the wording. I think it is the additional wording is quite restricted, but gives that flexibility for people who want to set up a business in the countryside. And one also must always remember that if people either have to travel to a place of business in a town, or they travel to, so it may not be in a sustainable location, but the person who's operated that business might live in the house next door or in the same village, and so you're reducing journeys because you're not having to travel so far. So I'm quite happy with the wording, actually.
Okay. I'll come to Councillor Shearer in a minute. I think Sarah wants to come in. I mean, it can be an issue. I know within my ward there are farms where they're using outbuildings and barns for storage facilities, and the problem is that very old cottages are being shaken to their foundations by the quite large vehicles going to and fro down country lanes. So it can be an issue. Sarah, did you want to come in?
I did want to. Thank you, Chair. So there is something in the NPPF that has changed, which is that basically it's conversion of existing buildings to support sustainable growth and expansion in rural areas, and well-designed new places, which isn't currently covered really in LPP7. And if I talk you through LPP7, it's sort of it's giving you sort of the existing test that gives priority to conversion without complete rebuilding, but then it's recognising that sometimes conversion isn't possible. But when you're expanding or extending an existing employment use, you know, you've got another set of criteria. So it is still giving that primacy to conversion as a first, and it does say then you've got to demonstrate that you couldn't be reasonably relocated to an alternative employment area. So it's keeping that sequential hierarchy in terms of where you should put the development first. So there is that thought process there, but I do think it's being added both from DM perspective, but it is also with a nod to the NPPF in terms of that new business in rural areas.
Councillor Shearer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually support this change in policy. I think it is quite restrictive, but I also think it will help with farm diversity in the future. We are looking towards having a prosperous rural economy as well, and I think that's essential. And as to regards to the sort of comments about large vehicles, well, of course, you know, don't forget that the average farm tractor now weighs well over 4.5–5 tonnes, and pulling at harvest time, quite often the trailers are at 18 tonnes gross weight as well. So the combination of that, with also grain and truck movements and fertilisers and poultry and everything else, these vehicles are often 42 tonnes, and they, of course, have all got right of access, and no restriction on environmental roads won't be applicable to it. But I think the important thing is that there's this flexibility that we can encourage rural prosperity and diversity for the long-term benefit of our rural areas across the whole of Braintree district, because that in itself helps, I think, with sustainability, to give those people local jobs near their villages, near the farms, and it's an important flexible point for rural life.
Yes, thank you. And yes, point taken about vehicles. I encountered an absolutely enormous farm vehicle on a very narrow lane only the other day. And I have to say his reversing was a good deal better than mine, actually. Yeah, so yes, point taken. Councillor Abbott.
Madam Chairman, as someone who lives in a rural area, I'm fully aware of the difference between seasonal agricultural movements, we have them at the minute, with grain trucks going backwards and forwards and combines. It's part of rural life, we're used to it, which is very seasonal. So this time of year is peak, this is when you get the most of them, and we accept it. We accept the combines in the fields at 2 o'clock in the morning. That is completely different to large HGVs operating out of farmyards all year round, from quite early in the morning, as another member said, rumbling past rural cottages every day. There's a clear distinction. So, you know, thanks for the lecture, but no thanks.
Okay. Councillor Schwer.
Madam Chairman, one, it was no lecture, it's a reality of rural life, but there are lots of livestock, and we have many chicken, units of chicken sheds with livestock industry where there are frequent extreme movements. I'm just saying that actually it is not just seasonal. You know, rural life and prosperity, I think, is not only important, but obviously there are going to be these traffic movements. And of course there is an extra seasonal demand, but actually if you look at the rural road usage now, there is a lot of HG movements through the rural areas.
Yeah, okay. Members, I need to move standing orders because we've reached the witching hour. Could yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you, members. Right. Okay.
The next policy is on tourism. There's no changes to preamble apart from to update the date. There are some minor changes to the policy for clarification as suggested by DM. That's just to help make the policy clear. It's very, very substantial change. We did remove the reference to the site needing to be screened because that's referred to elsewhere in the local plan. And that's the changes to the employment policies. For retail policies, there's some updates to the preamble, and it incorporates parts of section 1 into the text.
Councillor Parker.
Sorry, this is one of my pedantic spots of typo. Does 4.35, should it say there is some limited residual growth? At the moment it just says some limit. Yes. Sorry to be...
Yes.
Oh, yes, okay. Yes, fine, we'll change that.
Again, changes to update the documents in response to the study. And this updates the statistics so that reflects the latest history. This updates the uses so that it responds to the use class changes. And here we've implemented the recommendations from the study to reduce the thresholds for impact assessments.
Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Where it talks about the hierarchy, and it says local centres, I appreciate that is a reference to retail. Should that cross-reference to key service villages, which is a planning context? And is it right we have 5 of them? One, two, three. Is it right that we have 5 of them now?
We haven't made any. No changes to local centres have been made to the local plan, so we should still have the same number we had when we submitted the plan for examination in 2017.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it should cross-reference to key service villages, which is also a planning context, because I think they're all the key service villages, aren't they, or have I got that wrong?
We can add some additional text to clarify that local centres are all in key service villages.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, good, all right.
That's not changed. This policy is on primary shopping areas. I don't believe there's any changes proposed except some minor ones to update use classes. This has been removed actually on the request of development management. The next section is on district and local centres. We can change the local centres title here to refer to key service villages again. And then the district centre at Great Notley. These changes are in response to feedback from development management and the evolution of the proposal at Great Notley. I think it's the proposals will come to committee in a future planning application in any case. I don't think there's any changes to out-of-town retailing. And then that goes last. Yeah.
Councillor Bowes-Flint, sorry.
I think there are changes on there, and I think the changes are that there is not a regular bus service to Braintree Retail Park anymore because they're not providing one.
Okay.
So that is a bone of contention, I think, between this authority and Braintree Village. I don't know the true facts of it, but if you're referring to the bus service that runs through Cressing, that one actually goes round the retail park, then there's 1 hour during the week, but there's none on a Sunday. No buses on a Sunday.
Councillor Bowers?
Sarah goes.
Oh, Sarah, right, yep.
I was just going to make the point about the bus service, though it's not running at the moment, and I don't know if I have to declare an interest because I'm part of the Braintree Village Consultative Committee that discusses this on a regular basis, but it is part of the section 106 that is provided, so I'm not sure we could take it out, but I don't know, Sarah might be able to advise on that.
So yeah, we have been working informally to agree what service is reinstated, and we're expecting that to come through as a section 106A application. It may already be, and I haven't checked recently, to be honest. Yes, I think we can keep the reference to bus service. Perhaps we say that perhaps we take out the words more frequent, because it's a matter of fact that there is a bus service, I suppose, striking a balance.
Can I just ask if that would come to planning committee, that change of...
Yes, it would.
I think it would need to. Yeah, okay. Right.
Next is policy LPP 13, and there are substantial changes suggested to this policy, new additional text. It's designed to allow more flexibility for sports and leisure facilities.
Councillor Abbott?
Same question. Is the last bit local initiative, or is that required by the MPPF? Because what we're saying is that on a sequential test we might allow very substantial leisure buildings to be built in the countryside, and also there's a typo in the last line. It says if the meet.
Should be they, yes, yeah. They meet.
And what about the wider point?
This was a suggestion from development management to clarify how we deal with leisure and sports proposals. I think NPPF still refers to leisure uses being suitable for town centre locations. But this is proposing some edge of centre sites.
I think edge of centre is fine. It's going to the countryside. I mean, I personally think we need to take that last line out. If we're not required to do it, I think this type of facility, yes, centre, but if it can't go there, edge of centre. But then to say, well, if it can't go there, we'll just stick it in the countryside, I think that is quite a dramatic step. If we don't have to do it, I would suggest we take that one out.
Can I just bring Councillor Parker in and then Councillor Bowes-Flint, and then we'll see where we
There's
are.
a couple of points. Just picking up on Councillor Abbott's point, I mean, the wording says the site in the countryside needs to be adjoining the development boundary, so I don't think it's quite as alarming as he's thinking. But the point that I also wanted to clarify really was, I know we've had in the past, we've had issues with, I'm sure all those in the planning committee remember these, where there have been applications for leisure facilities on buildings which are not being used on employment sites, and for things like gyms and dance classes and things like that. So does this policy, because we talk about here about out of centre or edge of centre sites, does that include an employment site or not? Are we still suggesting that you shouldn't, for example, be allowed to open a gym in an industrial building, an employment site?
I can clarify that the protective policies in LPP3 should preclude leisure and gym uses on employment areas because they are protected for employment uses.
No, I'm only just really questioning, do we... I appreciate there's a debate about this, but is that something we want to do? I mean, there are plenty of other towns there are gyms on employment sites. I mean, it's a tricky one.
Sometimes when they spring up because of permitted development. So I think there are some permitted development mechanisms for gyms to happen in employment areas, which you cannot sort of preclude from policy, if you like.
Councillor Bowes-Flint. do you want to
Having
come in?
said that, there's a massive gym on Springwood Industrial Estate. But,
Yes,
and I hear what Councillor Abbott's saying, and no, as much as I would like everybody to have the opportunity to get to or access a sporting facility, because we all know the benefits of that to everybody. I don't need to say about that. But I think having it stuck in the middle of the countryside helps nobody, because basically it won't be accessible by public transport, which means that you would have to have a car, and not everybody's got a car or wants a car. So I think adjoining two would be better, because at least then it is accessible. But I think we still should promote as much as we can, where we can, that we get these facilities provided to give everybody the best opportunity there is. Because if we look into the future, there will not be the big leisure centres that we've got at the moment. There will not be that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Further to the point, Madam Chairman, although I think we all want to go home, it's internally inconsistent, the policy, because it says that an edge of centre site is an exception. And now we're saying at the end, well, if it doesn't meet the exception, we'll go for something that's even more exceptional. I just think that it's just going a step too far, and also it's internally inconsistent.
Can we take that away and have a look at it?
Yes, we'll take it away, and before it comes back for final sign off, we'll have looked at it.
I think if officers have noted the comments from around
I accept the points you've made.
the table, I think we'll have a look at it. Yep. Okay. Good.
Okay, moving on. Moving on to policy LPP 14. There's minor changes to it. It's just to update the date of the study and the date of the MPPF. There's no changes proposed to LPP 15, and that's the completion of the report.
Right. Councillor Parker.
Just a question really on sort of procedure. If subsequently we do end up allocating, as sounds very likely, some large housing sites somewhere or other, will there be any need to update this for example, additional retail or additional employment?
A large housing site would have its own policy, which would cover what we would be looking for it to provide within a proposal coming forward. So I think that's how we would deal with it in the first instance, is via its own policy.
Madam Chair, if it just, I'm just thinking of, for example, if a town was expanded hugely and there was a need for a much bigger supermarket, just for example, that obviously wouldn't necessarily be provided. I mean, does that then, how would that be, would we end up being addressing the retail requirements in the town, for example?
I think when you're thinking about the time frame, so if we allocate a large site within this local plan, it's going to take five years, at which point the local plan is going to need to be reviewed, at which point then you'd catch up with the supermarket, so you'd update the retail study, essentially. So I don't think there's any need to do it at this point in time, because I think there'll be a change overall, potentially, as wherever is allocated grows.
Okay. Right. Is that the end, Gary? Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, members. If there are no other comments on that, we get to the end of the agenda because there's no urgent business, public or private. So I will close the meeting.
Chairman,
We've got a vote.
Chairman, we need to...
Sorry. Yes, it's been quite a long evening. Right. Yes, we've just a small matter of having to vote on the recommendations, which
subject to the amendments.
subject to
And
the
comments are
amendments
made by officers
and the
members.
comments. Yes, right. So recommendations are on page. I can't believe I did that. Are on page 36, 2.1. That the content of the following policies is updated as set out in Appendix 1. There is the list. So it's subject then to the amendments and the comments that were made. Could I have a mover? Councillor Monday, Councillor Bowers seconding, and a show of hands, please. Thank you very much. I will now close the meeting. Yeah, at about 23 minutes past. But can I just ask you all to